there's like a certain level of like, okay, you know how to play within the constraints, but you don't go too far. People don't even realize for hacking, especially in the military, there's lots of different flavors of hacking. So my job is finding bad guys, and we don't even create an uninstaller. The uninstallation is gonna happen when a bomb drops on the bad guy. And that rocked my world the first time I realized I was creating software to more or less erase somebody. You know, the government has always been kind of slow and stodgy, but you're seeing a whole different thing. And some of the technology that's coming out, it's like, whoa, we're seeing a very modern government contractor. And the thing that's really wild about that's we now have a company in our country that if it did go that route, they'd be able to innovate very fast. I think that should at least give people pause. I'm not saying be scared of it, but fully consider like the scary part is not they have this technology or they have a surveillance state thing, because you can curb those again with laws and votes, etc. But what happens when the laws can't keep up with the state of innovation?
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Quick reminder that if you guys do enjoy this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like button below. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, make sure to follow the show and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you. Be able to start getting views.
And have no clue that no real human is actually watching anything.
Like 70% of the views come from China.
Yeah.
And once that happens on your YouTube channel, it's screwed. It'll no longer, because it just keeps recommending it to that initial audience.
Yep.
And then it just puts you down. And people that use that for business, they're not familiar with it. They get beat up by that.
I can only imagine. So, I mean, we're about $900,000 a week in ads we spend.
Mm-hmm.
And so, some months it goes, probably 3.5. Sometimes you get 5 months or 5 weeks in a month, and it goes, $4.5 million a month. And you can imagine it's just an easy way to, also you make a little mistake and you're like, whoa,
mm-hmm.
I just lost $1 million in ads. That's
and you got to put up more to get it going the other direction again.
Oh yeah. The undoing, like you said, once it thinks this is your target audience and ideal, and let me recommend, we do a lot to train, but thankfully there's, at least on the paid video is definitely different than paid search, and each of them has their own different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to retarget and say, hey, this is the type of viewer that actually matches. This is that, and a lot of the learning feedback mechanisms that now most of our stuff is real time. Like we're qualifying when like a lead comes in or a good view comes in or any of that stuff within a couple hours, and then it immediately gets fed back into the system to say, get me more of this, and exclusions are the other side. That's why we have probably about a dozen people. Half of our stuff is just exclusions. Don't give me that anymore, but man. Anyway, we don't need to derail.
Well, Kyle, man, welcome on the show. I'm really excited for this conversation. I mean, I know we were just talking offline a little bit, but like I said, we've had various people in the different intelligence groups, but to have someone that has a background in NSA, and then now, especially what you're doing with Huntress, it's so fascinating because the world is moving so quickly,
Preach.
Yeah, with technology and we'll get there in a little bit on AI, but it's just, you've also come up in such an interesting period where you've just seen it really evolve, and especially at, the national and kind of global level, the impact it has. So again, I'm just very excited for this conversation, man.
Well, I'm pumped to be here. What's funny, as a kid, I used to think that maybe I was born 10 years too late.
Mm-hmm.
I've now changed that perspective. I actually think I nailed it. I'm lucky to be born at this time. But growing up, I wanted to know all the analog signal things, all the different radio, hacking back in the day, intelligence gathering back in the day was just different. And now here I am and looking at like what 2025 looks like, and I'm going, oh man, if I would have missed this, like this is a rush.
Yeah, because I mean, right now, the quote unquote gold mine, but also just the implications of cybersecurity it's just never been at this level, because we were talking about AI offline, and I'd be interested in hearing this. That's actually going to be one of my first questions, just because I figured we'd want to lay some groundwork on hacking.
Let's do it.
Because again, I have a bit of a background in programming, computer science and stuff, but I feel like the majority of people have very little programming experience. But then also, the only experience that they have with hacking is in like Mission Impossible, like movies like that. So I was curious, could you maybe lay out the process of what hacking actually looks like, and yeah, pretty much how that system would actually work.
Yeah, so I'm going to lay it and start it with some bias, right? Everybody starts somewhere. I was a pretty broke teenage kid that joined the service at 17 and got really lucky that for 16 years of my time in the military that was supporting the National Security Agency, 13 years of it was doing offensive hacking. So my flavor is probably going to look a little bit different. And what's funny is depending on who the audience is, in the US, we'd probably say, oh, this is a patriot.
Yeah.
The other end of it, they probably call me like a malware author and things like that. But to me, hacking, I think it starts with a mindset. Really, there's a lot of rules out there that say this is what can be done. But a lot of hacking is just being able to say, like, I hear what you're saying, but let me prove whether or not that can actually be exploited to prove that maybe narrative completely wrong. And so for me, especially young, my version of hacking was like, man, I didn't have access to resources. I needed, early access to dial-up internet way before, AI, way before even like cell phone technology. And so for me at that point, hacking was like, all right, I was dealt these cards. I didn't have access to certain things. But, people had AOL, people had these credit cards, had these free systems of like dial-up internet that if you used a certain, code or a certain thing that would get you maybe 30 days of free internet. So my early days were like, how could I prove that system that's giving somebody a trial, could I make it work for a forever trial? And when I got that access, how could I go a step further? Could I get free games? Could I get free access? And then it turned into, well, can I get free intelligence? So
how were you learning this originally? Especially as a young kid? I
think it was just like an abundance of being grounded. And at that time, libraries weren't like cool, but like when you're grounded a whole lot, it was like, oh, but you can go to the library. So I started going to the library and reading like basic coding books, started teaching myself like basic software engineering, because what happens is a lot of time in the more modern versions of hacking, you're trying to do something either very, very quick or maybe at a scale that is just very, very fast. And you can't do that as a regular human. So I realized early on, like, okay, if I'm grounded, could I teach myself some of the basic stuff? And I'd have these books. And then when I get ungrounded, back to the computer, right? Learning to write scripts, learning to write code. And then I started realizing like, whoa, if you tie these two things together, plus, bring a little bit of brains, like, what if I could do some analysis and some social engineering, right? Give somebody a narrative that like, if I do this, they behave that way. And I started realizing early as a kid, like, wow, this could be super powerful. And to be honest, a lot of my hacking started before I joined the service. But thank goodness I joined at 17. So when you have to do a polygraph, you only go back to your 18th birthday.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good.
So I got kind of lucky there. Really lucky.
And I feel like too, the stories you hear and want to go through your early military career and everything as well. And then we'll get to more of the recruitment phase of stuff, but you'll hear about a lot of these agencies when they recruit people, there's certain things that they're okay with because that means that you fit the mold. And then there's certain things that like, a CIA agent, if they're going to be a case officer, if they're like, yeah, maybe did like a little bit of lying or like, they might be like, okay, you fit the role. Versus, if you're getting arrested for DUI or something.
100%, right? I mean, those are attributes of knowing like what level of gray, right? There's, say if there's 50 shades, right? There's a lot difference between, hey, I dabbled, I did this necessity, nobody gets too mad when you're breaking like anti-piracy protections, right?
Yeah.
And I was big into hacking Xboxes. I was big into soldering electronics, and nobody says like you're too crazy. If I was doing that same thing to like ATMs and draining people's bank accounts, probably would have never had a job in the service, let alone any job. So, which is funny. You're right. There's like a certain level of like, okay, how to play within the constraints. But you don't go too far. And oddly enough, I think that's part of pattern matching for way more than just like cyber too.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to bring this up with the recruiting, but I might as well now because this kind of fits. But there was always are you familiar with Cicada 3301, like when that was happening and all
No,
that?
school me real quick, but maybe I know it.
So this was, these pictures started popping up that were essentially, it was a butterfly and it had QR codes and it would lead to like complex coding problems or various issues that they would basically have to crack. And it would.
Was this for like talent scouting?
So that's what a lot of people think. It's never been confirmed. And there's also stuff that pops up all the time of like, how does the NSA talent scout? And it's like, I'm curious to hear your opinion on that because in my mind, I think that's a perfect way to do it because you're blending that unique mindset, that unique interests that you're going to want an agent to have while also making them solve some pretty complex problems legally, you know? But yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear on that. Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously I'll talk firsthand knowledge as well as just like, you know, everybody's seen a handful of these movies where somebody breaks into something. Maybe let's use a physical example. They were a bank robber, they got caught, and now they're, you know, working at the FBI helping to design systems to catch other bank robbers. I actually ran into very little of that. And the 16 years I was active, like indirectly in that, and now probably 20, 25 total years around that military and kind of intelligence apparatus. But what I did find is folks are always looking for diamonds in the rough. And it turns out a lot of those challenges, whether they were math puzzles, sometimes they're at universities. Like I didn't even realize how much of some of the early high school stuff that I was doing, some of these were just coding challenges, math challenges, things along those lines that I ended up later learned that like, oh, these were absolutely helping identify talent. Even when I later got in, like I joined the Air Force as a communications guy. I didn't go in as like, if you think of what the word cyber meant in the 90s, like that was like a dirty thing you did in a chat room, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing, but this was like coming across like when I joined in 2003, these words were starting to have more meaning. And thankfully enough of my little like kind of nonsense and shenanigans allowed me to get selected. So I 100%, I've seen it. And even the way that I recruit, like we used to recruit a lot from universities, even like first year students where we're like, hey, NSA has a lot of centers of excellence and a lot of military apparatus have presence at campus. But when you find good talent that might not quite fit the mold, like we definitely, why would you not leverage that opportunity? And to be honest, for someone like me, where it was like guaranteed job, I'm working with really bright people, you're going to give me like resources. I think when I was probably 20, they were giving me access to like multi-million-dollar budget. Like where else are you going to get that response? So you could imagine for me, joined at 17, flipped over to the offensive side of cyber, you know, probably they're in 20, 21 years old. And yeah, if it wasn't for some of those puzzle games, some of those challenges, some of the recruiting, like I would have never had a swing at it. So I don't know enough about the Cicada side. I've definitely heard similar of what you, like as soon as you started describing it, I was like, oh, I've heard this.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you? To be very frank, like you have to like, I mean, people forget, like, let's just use us as like a country. It's not by accident. Like we recruited a lot of like best and brightest, whether it was Olympic athletes or if it was German scientists at certain times. Like the real war out there is usually on knowledge. And now it's the difference between like human knowledge and synthetic knowledge.
I was going to say, and it's almost like we're in a new Cold War. You know, I'd love to dive into some of the foreign actors at some point because we're at a constant race with everybody. But we're almost at a new Cold War. And as you're highlighting there, like Operation Paperclip, it gets a lot of hassle, but truthfully, we might have not won the Cold War without us taking advantage of that. And it's the same thing now with all this talent that's out there. I mean, not only are they battling other countries, they're battling the private sector.
And I don't think people think about that. Like obviously there's a million different flavors of problems out there. And what the problem, like problems can coexist. Multiple things can be true at the same time. Like we can have real issues of, you know, for instance, maybe competitive in jobs and also still the need to be able to bring in top talent from the world through immigration. Like those simultaneous problems can exist. And it's one of those things that like I ran into recently, some Indian researchers, brilliant. And they told me that with their H-1B visa, they can go on green card, but I think they described the time that it took them like to actually get citizenship. Like because of the queue was 100 years. They would never actually, that is a major, like if we are in, and I truly believe we are in a, you know, we've always been in a race for intelligence. Like the human race has succeeded because of intelligence. I'm not so certain that we're not fully understanding, like as much as immigration can have negative impacts on an economy, there's certain talent you probably want if you want to stay ahead.
Well, because again, China is just going to pick them up right away. I mean, we've had.
I would say they are.
Yeah, I know they've grabbed individuals from OpenAI and everything, and then you have models like DeepSeek pop out of nowhere, and suddenly
nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. But again, like that's it's the same way with espionage secrets in the 50s.
And we do the same, right? All is fair in love and war in some of these things. And if you look, like a lot of people forget that while opportunity is not distributed equally, intelligence across the world appears to be. So even some of our investments in Africa that are kind of behind, and it's allowing other countries, obviously Russia has had huge influence in Northern Africa for a long time. You've had the Chinese do massive investments in, for instance, communications and education. Like that's about talent. It's about people that will be able to keep, whether it's innovation, not everything is intelligence gathering, but like brains go a long way when it comes to like helping your
also
country
getting the
succeed.
Right brains too. Cause in your shoes, if you know someone's extremely smart, but maybe not as defensive with information, you guys have a good opportunity to gather there too. So you got to know someone that can kind of blend both intelligence and also recognizing they're in a,
and even within the US, right? There's those third parties of like, can you make somebody, for instance, an asset that doesn't even know they're being handled? Like what better way to get it? That's actually even happening right now in cybercrime. Some of the biggest cybercrime groups that are behind these million or multi-million, in some rare cases, $billion schemes, the people working for the cybercrime groups don't even know sometimes they're working for cybercrime.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not just the, intelligence handling. Like this is now like part of modern, some people would call it espionage. Some people would call it cybercrime. I'd call it modern economics.
So you think it's a bit of a blend with, because it's funny, you look at a country like North Korea, right? Like a lot of their actions are often cybercrime of trying to steal whatever amount of money or Bitcoin or anything like that for, because a lot of ways that's kind of how they're funding the nation.
Yeah.
And then you need a country like Russia, which is probably, or China, doing more like intel gathering. So do those actors a lot of times when they're recruiting, they're kind of just going along with maybe a payment or something like that?
Yeah. So not only is there that side of the house of where, for instance, let's choose North Korea because it's so much fun. If you're from DPRK, the irony is you can't even conduct cyber operations from within country. You don't have established internet. So most of the time they live right across the river, both in China and in Russia. If you're familiar with the geography, there's both of these areas here. And a lot of these times, right? Yes, they can do, like right now in the news, it's really hot with all the deep fake technology and interviews and things along those lines. But some cases, there's still just good old fashioned espionage where people don't even know that the folks that they're being recruited to do work by, et cetera, are, for instance, an asset, right? Or somebody that's handling them and making them the asset. It's a caseworker, a handler that's then saying, hey, guess what? I need you to work this for me. And sometimes it's accidental leaking of intellectual property. Hey, I used to be here. Now I'm here. That startup didn't work. Somebody's caught in the middle. Hey, I can offer you a certain job. And oftentimes you nailed it. It's funded by, Bitcoin had to come from somewhere.
Yeah. What do you think about Bitcoin? I mean, I know you mentioned on Team House that you're not exactly a huge fan of crypto, but Bitcoin,
if I was a cyber criminal, man, it is
a fun playground.
God's gift to like both, like the anonymity is still largely there. There are some crypto assets and things like this that provide better protections than others. In the world of like unstable economic situations, like there's some global economies where Bitcoin is a lot more stable. So it has a forcing function. There's also the whole like pyramid side of, hey, keep buying in, keep pumping the value. But from a pure like fiat currency or needing to be able to exchange, there's a lot of cybercrime that only till the very end, when it gets cashed out into whatever, denomination in physical dollars,
Mm-hmm.
you can leave that digital for a really long time, which means even when you steal it, why not do as many illicit things as possible with it? And when it comes to like hiring, there's no better way than to hire somebody who's also in the crypto game. If you know somebody who's a Web3 developer, a crypto coin developer, and you have this big stolen cache from a heist you did from maybe a crypto coin, it doesn't have to be like a big exchange. It could be just someone's personal wallet.
Pull, yeah.
You don't even ever have to turn that into $1. You could hire another engineer to work on maybe one of your other programs, one of your other collection systems, and they don't even know because they're a crypto coin, team. They think they're building maybe a system that's meant for chat, and it turns out, oh, it's meant for chat, all right. It's meant for chatting about ransom, right? It's meant for negotiation that now I have your data. And I think what most folks don't realize, it's so similar to the old school handling of like assets.
Mm-hmm.
You just sometimes don't even know you're being used.
Well, everything's tied back to Bitcoin too, in one way or another. Like the whole market, if Bitcoin goes down, Ethereum blows up, Solana blows, like they all. So at the end of the day, it's like even if they try to be their own institutionalized coin and we're separate, it all still it's the same way the global economy ties back to USD. Like Bitcoin's still kind of the home base there, and the creepiest part about it too, the man who invented it we don't know who invented it.
Yeah, the shady alias, right?
Yeah. In your mind, looking at that from an outwards perspective, and like, do you think it was created by an individual? Do you think that there's probably more layers to that?
So some of my favorite, like I always believe when there's enough tinfoil hat around, there's probably some truth. I'm talking about people like my favorite are conspiracy theories, but it's kind of funny how often conspiracy theories have like, little sprinkle of some truth that actually started. It probably doesn't matter what I believe, but obviously someone created it or a small group of people created it and they haven't dumped it, which means it probably has a really big purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact, like, think about like what humans aren't is patient. I find whoever created it, because we're talking like, we're no longer on 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. We're talking a system, and obviously you mentioned there's plenty of offshoots. There's Doge, there's Ethereum, right? Litecoin, there's a billion coins, a Trump coin today, right? But the funny part about it is this is serving a bigger purpose. But if you go back to what you mentioned, the Bitcoin side of the house, someone was playing a long game. They're sitting on top of this, and maybe they've passed. Maybe we'll never see anything like, truly crazy. But there's a lot of commentary right now. Is this a bigger play at like, canceling lots of debt?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a bigger play that this is just going to be used for nothing but saving the world from, corrupt financial systems? Or is there something more sinister? And I got to believe at this point, it almost doesn't matter. Why can't all three of those be true at this point? For me, if I was a cyber criminal, if I'm doing hacking, or hell, if I'm back, it's been years since I've been in the building, there's a 0% chance we are not using some of the same assets to be able to do and fund our own operations.
Mm-hmm.
What better non-attributable way instead of flying, planes full of cash somewhere? If I stole somebody's crypto coin and then disseminated it to somebody else, like it's available and you didn't have any of the risk of a dead drop, any of the risk of the physicality, even just the inconvenience of moving real cash if it's not a wire. I don't know. I think there's a good chance all three of them are true, that whoever created it had a purpose. It's definitely being used maliciously. It's being used for good too. And I think we're probably going to get to see this just play out. I don't think it's going anywhere. What do you think?
So I actually fully agree with that. And honestly, the way you just framed it, it immediately popped in my head because a lot of the conversation is Satoshi Nakamoto, I believe, is the character that's behind the founder. A lot of people often say like it could be state actors, it could be this, with the way the global economy is spurned, especially since beginning of, the Iraq war and everything and war on terror and all the money we spent there. And, it, as that asset continues to inflate and everything's kind of going downhill, you hear all the futurists point towards Bitcoin. They say, and this is our easy out, but if you're in somebody in a position of power, funneling everyone to kind of a new system that we can essentially reset when we have $39 trillion of debt, it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of opportunity for negatives there too, because people become so reliant on.
And this is the best part about it. Everything you just said could be true. And to be honest, probably is some level of truth to it. I think the part that I enjoy so much about, all of this is regardless of the end goal, look at the amount of things that happen. Like I think just recently we had the pardon that just happened of the Silk Road founder.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things, regardless if you agree or disagree, leave the politics aside, the fun part is what happened to all that Bitcoin that was apprehended? Did the FBI take it and put it up for auction and for bid? How much of that, there's a lot of why would we not use some of that from just a pure nationalistic standpoint? Why would I not use that to fund some of my operations? Yes, it has some track back that this could be the FBI, but we've seen the modern, both nation state actors and cyber criminals can mix, meaning they can route it through tens of thousands of these proxies to make it much harder to attribute where these things came from. If I'm playing, chess over checkers, let alone 4-dimensional chess or something like this, why would I not use these seized assets? Why would we not have the equivalent of a North Korean capability that steals Bitcoin for our own attributions? What better way to fund your mission than to take somebody else's Bitcoin? Why would we not do that?
Yeah, we clean cash all the time. It's a known thing. I've had plenty of CIA agents on that literally will say, this is how we clean cash. If we're giving it to this guy, we're going to pay him whatever sum of money because he's going to tell us where we can go find so-and-so. And, or even soldiers, a lot of the Delta Force guys, they'll give them a Rolex because if they're behind enemy lines and they need something to quickly barter with, just toss that. Maybe now you can just give them a USB with 1 Bitcoin on it,
it's wild. It's 100% wild. I do think that there are limitations, but I think what's neat about this is despite all this whole cyber world and all the words we just threw out there about this whole system that could be propping up, could be tearing down debt. And then we look at something like Ukraine and you see where a lot of these cyber systems, despite all the sexiness of cyber war, that's still a very kinetic war at the end of the day. It is still taking down people's actual energy systems with good old fashioned bombs on bad guys. The cyber effects do happen, but I think that's the wildest part about cyber now. It's kind of like an ingredient and you can mix and mash and do whatever the heck you want. But at the same time, it's not the end all be all. We can't get away from the kinetic side of warfare. So it's just a wild thing that while you have this thing that is so exciting like Bitcoin or AI or whatever the topic du jour is, yet to take a country, you still have to put boots on ground and you still have to pay in blood.
So I want to get into that too, because I think that's incredibly interesting, especially, with Anduril's new Eagle Eye and the impact that can have. But just sticking with the Bitcoin idea for one.
Yeah, let's go.
Is why do you, and again, we're never going to know the inner workings of what's happening at every agency, and we've seen it time and time again. The CIA could be doing one thing, the NSA is doing another thing. Everyone's doing
They're compartmented for a reason, right?
Yeah. What do you think makes, or you may know, but why is Bitcoin, why is it so difficult to find who a Satoshi might have been, wherever these actors are? Because I would imagine that would be almost priority number 1 for an agency because this person's sitting on
troves, right? If you look at the valuation, even with the change of Bitcoin recently, right, of even the biggest drops, it's still tons, unfathomable
billions
amounts of
and
money.
billions.
Exactly. I would guess that if my job was to track somebody down, I think John McAfee has done plenty of look, who could it be? He's summarized it very simply of let's take a look at the papers. Let's look at, for instance, the localizations, the S's between Z's, the way that people use single space, double space. Most of life isn't that simple. And for something that has the patience that has lasted this long, I would hope that the answer wouldn't be that simple of, oh, we do know who it was, and we do know because of the uses of S's versus Z's, we got a good idea of this could be a Brit. But the irony about all this stuff is, I think if you just go back to a conversation we said earlier, we were talking about recruiting, and there's so many different flavors of recruiting. You can be recruited directly into the military. You could be recruited into a research lab, meaning maybe you're not the barrel-chested freedom fighter type, but you still have a big brain. Every service branch has, for instance, an education, apparatus. Why could this not, and why should this not still be maybe nation state, but could it be more academic? Could it have that angle? And if it was that case, I gotta imagine usually, intelligence works on all sources. We spend a lot of time both protecting our nation's secrets at our biggest, centers of innovation, a lot of our schools. And so if it was a foreign, for instance, university, I would assume our intelligence apparatus would have probably started and had word there. And to be very frank, if it was us that created something like that, or a Five Eyes group that created something like that, I would imagine other foreign governments would probably know. So I think my point is if this was this just master plan, it just seems like it's been a lot of time for no one to actually know. But who knows? What would they do with it? Even if you had the money, would you collapse Bitcoin, or would you actually keep it? Like, for instance, if I had a secret weapon that could turn off the internet tomorrow, would you, just because you find it, would you use it? Or would you say, nah, that's not my weapon. I'm going to keep it over here because I don't know when I might need to turn the sucker off. So even if they did find it and they did have the keys to the private keys, I mean, you start getting to some really obscure things. But to be very frank, I'm not so sure that the authors have been found. I'm not sure who originally had the private keys to the wallet that contains so much Bitcoin is even still the same actor today. Why would it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating too, because I mean, especially mentioning universities and everything, like that tends to be, like DARPA and everything, like that tends to be our home ground for a lot of this. So
Silicon Valley, right, was a result of both military collaboration and amazing universities. Like, why would that not have a highly probable, answer? And what's funny is even these agencies, even at NSA, we had the research organization, which was very different than some of the operational sides of the, the mission. So I don't know. I think that's probably the fun about this is it seems very likely that a collaboration like that could have happened. And it also, if a collaboration like that did happen, whether it was ours or not, why would you not try to find that through all of your signals, right? Whether it's signals intelligence, human intelligence, gathering it from all the old school methods. I mean, because man, having access to control a wallet that could then potentially collapse, get a country completely dependent on Bitcoin and then just dump it. I mean, that's a powerful tool.
Well, it's like I'm blanking on the movie name where, the nuclear war movie.
Gosh, there's only like a dozen of
them.
I
know. It makes the trope of like the German scientists and everything, and then it comes out that Russia has a bomb that can destroy the world. I mean, obviously not realistic, but they have a bomb that can destroy the world. And then when they start launching nukes at each other, the scientist comes out. It's like, yeah, we've had this bomb, and the other one's like, if you have the bomb, you have to tell people you have the bomb because then we don't know. It's the same thing with Bitcoin here. It's whatever side has it, you use it as a negotiation tool, and it keeps society moving in a direction you want it to go while also not having to pull the trigger on something that could cause a detrimental collapse.
So you just hit something that I love that I don't think enough people think about, right? There is real showmanship to intelligence handling. It's a battle of the brains, but it also has brawn, right? It's I don't know if you've ever seen, for the geeks out there, there's a comic called XKCD. And it has this geek like me saying, oh, I have the best, 2048-bit encryption. I'm going to solve that. And then the jarhead next to him, it says, actually, I'll take this $5 wrench and beat the password out of them. That's how that's how these two come together. Now, what I wanted to tie this to is both of those, for instance, probably have some reality. And I always find it really interesting when other people change behaviors. And by people, I don't mean individuals. I mean usually large government, large organizations, nonprofits, but maybe not for the reasons understood. Like for quite some time, China was extremely negative on crypto. And then it's gone kind of back and forth and CCP has changed. But for instance, if I knew, well, let's come up with the most unlikely example. If Nicaragua government and researchers created Bitcoin, and I knew they were unhinged and very unlikely to be overthrown, maybe a more realistic example is like Venezuela, and they had this, I probably would demand my country not to leverage Bitcoin, because the more dependence on that and the chance that, this weapon exists, I'm not so sure that there is not some understanding that somebody probably controls this. And as a result, but look at the US, generally speaking, is it because we're so capitalistic that we become so obsessed with Bitcoin and there's lots of use? I mean, look at how much money, billions of US dollars, real, greenbacks turned into these crypto assets. Sometimes they get stolen, sometimes they get used and abused. That seems to be a country that, for instance, either one, just wants to make tons of money and maybe it's capitalist that runs it, or maybe they're not so worried that, in my theoretical example of Nicaragua or Venezuela, is going to do something shady. But there's been other countries who've had different reactions to it that seem to be more concerned. And so I don't know. Again, all this goes back to how tight you want to put your tinfoil hat in your conspiracy theory. But I myself find it interesting that there's just some people who don't care. Like cyber criminals clearly don't care if it's used, because right now it's just a tool to get the job done. And those can exist both at the nation state level, where this is a clearly known, a piece, maybe not a pawn, maybe it's a rook, maybe it's a bishop, but it's clearly a big piece. And I'm not so sure that other governments haven't considered regulating from just the theory. And I think that goes back to the people have to know you have the bomb. So maybe there is some assumptions that countries that have done more regulation, maybe they're aware that there is the bomb. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I don't think if you go back and show like a Bitcoin enthusiast in 2011 how the scale of the currency now, and the fact that you have the White House that's considering buying reserves of it, and then if you go just south of the border, you have the cartel using it instead of having to clean money. It's like the way that it's quickly taken over as a global currency. You have countries all over the world that are starting to make it essentially replace the original currency because inflation, this and that.
Yep.
It's just so fascinating. And, you mentioned the tinfoil hat, and it's like some things are conspiracies and some things are rabbit holes that you can actually go down.
I mean, the one part that is fact, and you can see it on the blockchain, is those original massive tranche of Bitcoin still exist. Maybe the private key is flushed down the toilet somewhere in somebody's, garbage dump. Maybe the person who had it has passed and it's lost. But those are real and they exist. And as long as they exist and there is no confirmation that they can't be abused, it's funny, anybody who's building on top is taking risk. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying you're a cyber criminal. You don't care.
How much does it worry you as obviously somebody kind of at the forefront of that now with cybersecurity, with companies transitioning or utilizing it more too? Because I would imagine there's a lot more threats, hurdles to jump, and especially you get massive companies like Blackstone, which are opening their own, Bitcoin focused ETFs. Like, yeah, I guess in your mindset, how much does that worry you? Does it look just like a new challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't put my money in Bitcoin largely because I've got enough going on that I just chose, I'm not going to become an absolute expert in that. I know a lot about it because a lot of my life is interconnected with it, but I'm by no means a Bitcoin expert. However, when I think to myself of what is the risk, we're at a place in time right now that you have to go back gosh, I mean, we're probably in the dark ages, the last time you had the type of transfer of wealth moving from what we currently call Western culture to other places. Like, think of the last time things were pillaged the way cybercrime. Like, I just had a statistic come across our desk the other day, and we had to validate it because we didn't believe it was real. But it came from a very well-known credit card processor. You probably have one of these credit cards in your wallet. And their economists mentioned that when it comes to the world economies, you have the US GDP, which is the largest, you have the Chinese GDP. And if you take the actual losses plus all the other kind of, call it the splash, the blast radius of all the things that come from fraud and cybercrime, it's the third largest world economy. And if you look at that, if that is true, which there's a lot of people who say it, I'm not an economist, but I definitely read. And if that is true, and I think about the amount of fraud that's happening, I am not so certain that adding another currency right now, that there is no easy undo button, there is no easy unsend. And to be honest, you don't want to. You don't want the Bitcoin ledger to have this.
To be manipulated.
Yeah, and you want it to be immutable. And as a result, in the height of possibly the largest like transfer of wealth since maybe Alexander the Great, or maybe even Genghis Khan, like, you know, their capital back then was both people and culture and intelligence, as we kind of mentioned earlier. Like, if we're in the middle of the largest since then, I think there's just some time where we have to say, man, is enough? Do we need another? Don't get me wrong. I'm not at all telling people don't do crypto, but for me, it's just one more thing to deal with, one more distraction. And as a result, it's hard enough just doing normal things, let alone accounting for like, I mean, think when last time you had credit card fraud, you probably just went into your Amex app, reported as credit card fraud, and then it just magically came back. There's nothing equivalent on that end. And so like not having those consumer protections, part of me is like, you know, fuck around and find out.
Yeah, literally.
The other side of me is like, gosh, do we right now, in the midst of everything that's going on, midst of AI, everything, I mean, do we need another currency? But then again, if I was in a country where like my currency is being inflated or deflated and just kind of, you know, I mean, I would be angry at the words I'm saying. So if you can't tell, I'm really split over this. I'm not personally doing it. I don't mess with it at Huntress. We don't do anything along those lines. But we sure as heck keep a close eye on it because things change fast.
Yeah.
And so if you can't tell, like, I wish I could have, like, I hate sitting on the fence. I think it's the worst, you know, pick an opinion, you know, be polarizing, you know. I don't mess with it, not because I think it's a bad idea. I don't mess with it because I can't take the complexity, but I think there is a lot of ways to make a lot of money. And I think there's also a lot of ways to commit a lot of fraud.
I wonder what people are going to be thinking hearing that too, because it's like the funniest part about it is I guarantee you'd probably take 95%, and that's probably being generous, of those invested into it and ask them to explain the blockchain or just anything around it.
No way. You don't think so?
They'd have no understanding. They just say it sounds cool. And I would say, you know, you could put your money in it. And
I've met people that knew nothing about it and have made good money.
Yeah.
And I've known vice versa, just something as simple as like, oh, I did have it, but I threw that away. Or ironically, I've got a cell phone. It's like, you know, old school, like not quite flip phone, but like BlackBerry style device that still has like half a Bitcoin on it. One of these days, it's going to be worth enough that I'll send it out to a shop to help me recover. But the amount of folks that I've met that are like, oh man, I just lost access to my wallet. It's a brick. And it's crazy, like you said, and most people have no idea. Like, we're talking at a level that most people are just like, I thought it was cool.
Yeah. Well, because again, it's such a mysterious asset. When you read, you know, I've had futurists that have come on and genuinely believe Bitcoin is the future of global currency. They think that's where all the money is going to flow. But with something that powerful, to have so many questions, you know, that's where it becomes just scary, because the tech part of it too, you know this for sure. No matter how safe they say it is, there's always going to be risk. There's always going to be people that can get in the wallets, and it's a lot different than just cold hard cash. But not even knowing who owns the good majority of it, there's just so much out there that it's like I sit on the fence as well, as you can tell.
And what's funny is I'll play devil's advocate for 1 second. Like, since when was the US dollar backed by gold in Fort Knox?
Mhm.
Like, it's kind of fake too. I mean, there's obviously more to it. And there are some of this, but what's really interesting is like, I think I could make just as many arguments against myself as for myself. And I've just chosen a side.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, again, it's one of those things that 40, 50, 100 years from now, it'll be very interesting to see what kind of picture we get because more information will come out. Maybe that money starts getting spent. Maybe one country or another comes out and says, you know, hey, they're the ones with everything in there. So it's one of those things that it's an experiment. We're just
Yep.
kind of have to wait and see on that.
Can I leave you with maybe one closing note from like Huntress? We do a lot of takedowns. That means we like work with law enforcement to actually arrest people, not just like, oh, you're bad, or we call out your handle or whatever, but like truly handcuffs, sometimes into the black van.
Mm-hmm.
What's wild is in these raids, oftentimes there's a GoPro or there's subpoena information or it shows up in a court case, etc. What I'm blown away by is despite all this like talk that you and I just went on about all the benefits of the anonymity and how easy it is to keep it digital, every time I see one of these raids and they do the inventory, for some reason in cybercrime, there is always more money in actual converted to cash than it is in Bitcoin. It always somehow gets, again, cleaned and it still turns in. So if the futurists are right, cybercrime, like if they truly believed it, why not keep it in that? And I just find that such an interesting thing. And all the arrests that have been done and all the takedowns, there is 100% of the time. Maybe someone's going to prove me wrong. 95% of the cases that I get to read, right? Exactly. They are cashing it. And maybe it's just not accessible enough for real life. You don't feed yourself with 0.0001 Bitcoin.
Yeah, and also maybe they're worried about it gets stolen from someone else. They steal it, gets stolen. Like you said, the government comes in, takes it. We're going to use it for an operation. You know, thank you.
Yep.
Where he's continuing back. I know I asked this offline, but because I want to develop a clearer picture of like hacking, like what that actually looks like with, you know, the steps and stuff. But that brings me to my first initial subscriber question. What is an NSA's hacker favorite language?
Goodness. Okay. So you're talking like coding language, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So even though there's a lot of the operating systems, right? Windows, Linux, Mac, that are built on these older languages, right? C, assembly, because something has to talk to the actual hardware. Everyone that I know from either exploit development, testing out code, even sometimes writing some operations or creating really like wild math and, you know, libraries are all using Python these days. And it's not the fastest. It's not the, I don't want to say robust, but there are plenty of other languages that have benefits over Python. But man, it is like the Swiss Army knife. So if I was to use, whether it's my coworkers at NSA, or if I go and look at like the Capture the Flag team, the hacking team that I actually participated in this like true competitive hacking with, everything we did was in Python.
That's so incredibly interesting because it's like Python's such a funny language because it has so many use cases, but it's also the first language that a lot of people learn coding because it has the simplest syntax. It's the most readable.
Don't have memory management. There's some fails. There's some things that it's not great, or some things you have to sometimes use C to compile these like, so it's not interpreted language. So you get the performance, or you get closer to the processor. So you get better performance, but man, it's versatile. It can do a lot.
So that's what I would ask. So if you're, and I guess this brings us into kind of highlighting like what a hacking process would maybe actually look like for those that, again, the only thing they see is
let's go.
They plug in a USB and a bunch of green stuff pops up and they're like, oh, we're in. Would you utilize Python for if you guys are trying to get information on, let's say, a target or something? Because you were mentioning speed is key. And obviously Python, comparable to languages like C, is known to be slow. Like, is that something you guys are thinking about? And are you maybe designing your system and then we'll work it into a quicker language or something like that.
Yeah, let's make it real life. If you watch any type of like actual tradecraft, right? You talk about, do you use, C4? Do you use a different explosive compound? And do you use something that smokes, not smokes? What programming language you use is very similar. You got to use the right tool. So ironically, the example I gave you when I said Python, because it's so versatile, it's mostly used on back end. And so I want to help for somebody who doesn't know what hacking is like. A good example of back end operation. If I got to send 10,000 or 10 million emails, I'm going to have to write that. But that's something that's happening on my server, my code. Or if I'm receiving your stolen data, Python is a great language for some of this real easy, versatile collecting data. It can work with databases. And as a result, most even security researchers, when they're making something that can like hack into a website, it could be, for instance, Python, but it's not the perfect language for everything. Like when you run code on Windows, the most commonly used operating system, or if you think about your mobile phone, those devices don't have Python on by default. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, it's usually only really janky. Like what I mean by this is hackers wouldn't want to carry Python with them, right? They would want something that would work natively. And so where I'm getting at is, because there's so many different facets of hacking, I probably wouldn't use Python to, for instance, be a keystroke logger that monitors whether you're typing in your phone or typing in that. It doesn't work with the operating system. So I'd use something like C. And if I was having to do some very, they call it an exploit. That just means you're taking code that got some input or behavior it wasn't supposed to, and then you wanted to make the processor, the brain, right? Whether it's an ARM or an Intel, you have to write sometimes in assembly. But the reason I said if I could only choose one is the vast majority of all this rapid prototyping can be done in Python. And it's kind of very similar to if you think about like deploying. Most folks in the US are carrying the M4. Yeah. Perfect.
But if you're Delta,
you're probably not carrying, or maybe you have something suppressed, or maybe where you're living, it's better to have something that fires off of 7.62 instead of, some maybe NATO round or,
To the level that you can answer this, because again, I know there's certain things that just, is there, and I'm trying to think of the best like one-to-one example for something that just actually became public use. It's a new silencer that was created for Delta Force because they had to get a target.
Yeah.
And they had to be able to drop 30 rounds without the barrel overheating. So the way the silencer is developed, it's roundabout, and then there's different inflection points where it helps dissipate heat and et cetera.
So you're saying it's a little bit more advanced than an oil filter.
Exactly. Okay. It was something that, they came into the shop and they said, hey, we need this. And the guy's like, okay, I don't know why you're going to need this, but I don't know why anyone would need this. They used it one time and then it was done. Is there similar development in the NSA when you guys are working for complex systems and stuff? Is it blending of languages? There's a kind of creation of newer tools?
Especially in this post-AI world now where AI can largely say, give me this rough functionality in this language. Oh, now give it to me in that language. And so sometimes you use what's the best tool for the job. Like you said, sometimes it might be one-off. Like I've written some crazy, like there's these old school systems, the Sun Microsystems, Solaris Spark CPUs. I had to learn some of these languages and some of this programming that was from like the 70s and 80s. And the oldest one I ever learned is when I was doing some assessments on some of the aircraft. So if you think about modern aircraft, they all have computers and stuff. But if you think of something like the A-10 Warthog actually still has computers on board. And sometimes it's getting these upgrades like better avionics, better, intelligence systems. Sometimes they put like electronic warfare systems on these because they can fly real low. And people forget, like, you sometimes, when you're a hacker doing some of this, you might have to write for whatever the target supports. So when I got a chance to beat up the A-10, I was literally programming for a system that was created, and a lot of the protocols and a lot of the programming languages and the way I had to talk to things over the network were straight up from the very, very kind of mid 60s to 70s. And if you think about that, that's like my mom it was born in the 60s. Like these languages older than my mom. So it's a wild part of, this is why going back to our earlier topic about recruiting is so much about intelligence. Like you have to have somebody truly versatile that says, I'm here to get the outcome. Nobody cares about the output. It's the outcome. And that might mean I have to learn all kinds of crazy little things if I'm really going to deliver the outcome. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes in hacking, we have to create that custom silencer that does have to be silenced 50 rounds because I don't know who you're taking down. Maybe it's Hulk. You have to take down the Hulk quietly. We'll just pretend it's not a whole bunch of people. And yeah, sometimes the exact opposite happens. Sometimes you just need something loud and show of force. And so sometimes the tools that we would create are kind of like you mentioned, people have to know a weapon exists to have like that fear. And so sometimes you create a tool that makes it very loud and very clear. Like, I'm going to make sure you know exactly what this can do because, there might be things more strategic than just getting, the output might be the hack. The outcome might be, whoa, the adversary's taking different decisions because they know this now exists.
Are you guys often working in tandem as well with military groups and everything, ensuring that their systems are also, like, I guess that's the concept of like white hacking, right? Or
Yeah. So at Huntress, we don't actually work with any government. What's funny about that is we collaborate with like law enforcement, but that's us going to them. But during the time that I was like actually like active duty and in the National Guard, doing like the 1 week in a month, 2 weekends a year, absolutely, man. We spent a lot of time hardening, but even things that weren't super sexy, like people forget, like as a guy who grew up in intelligence, right? I mean, and wet behind the ears at 17, joined the service. It turns out I learned a lot about how much I appreciate privacy. Like that is really important to me. Turns out when you like have a job that violates a lot of like, NSA's mission is purely abroad. The hardest part about that was I could watch and was like, whoa, my own privacy could be invaded this way. So ironically, just pulling this full circle, a lot of what we used to do would be even securing things like, imagine like state police records. A lot of stuff happens, right? And it could be things like, hey, you got drunk and, screwed around, or maybe you got a ticket for peeing on something or something along those lines. But people forget, like, when that database that's owned by the state police department or local police department is unsecured, like that could be the end of your job just because maybe you had a great consulting job at one of the, I don't know, Accenture or Deloitte, one of these big fancy firms. But all of a sudden it comes out that you were an idiot because some podunk, not sexy military apparatus, but somebody who had data on you from when you were a kid and now it's public, like that could be the end of your job. And so I actually was not just proud about the work that I used to do, like, let's make sure things couldn't get hacked, especially like the top secret stuff was super cool. Like, that's the stuff that like wakes you up in the morning. But the things I actually think that are like the most fulfilling in hindsight, I look back and it's like, man, like when I was in Maryland and I was in the state National Guard, we worked with so much of the state's apparatus because if I was on the other side, right, the foreign version of Kyle, I would have totally abused these systems. I would have gone after all this stuff. And at the right time, I would have definitely abused people who either have dirt on them. And I mean, what better handling now when you compromise the database and you're like, look, I know you really do have money problems because I can see it here. I see you filed for, maybe foreclosure on something, or you have bill problems. And this
divorce
is the stuff,
or whatever.
Dude, and you go back to the old school intelligence apparatus of mice, right? Why do people, conduct espionage? A lot of time it's just money, right? And that's the M in mice. And I think hacking is the perfect tool for that. I also think hacking is the perfect tool to feed a lot of these AI models. So I don't think people are thinking about that. But when I was there hardening or being this white hat ethical hacker, I don't even think I realized at the time that I knew the databases could be valuable. I've always been into data science, but it was more like machine learning. I don't think I quite realized how quick things would have taken off. And now I think about it, I'm like, wow, these databases are so ripe for just building packages. Hey, I want to go after so-and-so. Combine this with this with this. How would you actually exploit them or leverage them? That is a sexy way to be able to truly,
I didn't even think about that. That's because I was going to ask about some of these large companies and kind of the risks with that now, but even you guys, whether it's private or public sector, utilizing these models to create mock characters and being able to say, okay, if I'm going after so-and-so target, what does this process look like? What is that? And that's incredible.
And even if it's not perfect, even if it's like 60%, let's not give it 80%, let's give it 60. That's efficiency all day long. And if you look at us talking about, there's only so much intelligence, right? It is distributed equally, but there is a finite resource of intelligence. There's usually finite resources of money. Even if your government can print its own, some of the part comes data. And I really don't think even though I was protecting these and I would say, watch out for data, it can be leveraged. I don't think I fully considered that. What if you have all these databases? Now you have a really good model at correlating and summarizing things very succinctly, because AI is not solving all the world's problems, but darn if it's not good at summarizing and analytics right now. And heaven forbid you throw something like quantum compute out there.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, all these databases who you've been gathering data for years, we know China has done a great job. Like, I hate to admit it, but they have wrecked us when it comes to stealing like massive amounts of US data, not just intellectual property. I'm talking about databases. And again, we do the same. So it's tit for tat. All is fair. But man, what good hordes of data to have, like that OPM breach that stole, so much federal information, or, people in DOD. And now you can use a correlation engine, use your own AI, your own country ingrown DeepSeek, and be able to ask, combine this data with this data with this data, and how would you leverage it? Throw a little horsepower behind the compute, whether that's AI chips or quantum, and like things are going to get real fucking weird in the next probably 15 years. I don't even think 20. I think 15.
That's actually horrifying. I had not even thought of that before, but man. Yeah, because especially too, these, like you said, the systems, I think what everyone was thinking, like I said, a year ago, 2 years ago, we're not going to get there. But we're moving in a direction where it's like just the perfect balance of it can be utilized in that way. It's not going to bring AGI, but it's going to be utilized in that way that it can give these countries a really critical advantage in, a lot of this tradecraft and stuff. I guess that kind of brings to the second point. You see not countries, well, at this point, essentially countries. You see companies like OpenAI. I mentioned DeepSeek, which is a foreign company on that, but a company like Scale AI, which is really focused on gathering informations to help train these models.
Yep.
Does that worry you, seeing that ideally, if you're a country trying to gather as much information and you have these massive databases that are collecting, tons of information for training models, like, does that worry you that that's kind of an open door to just so much information about whoever they may be targeting?
You let me put my shady hacker hoodie on for a second and riff with you. So doesn't just worry me. The warning I think I would share with folks is like, we just saw some pretty big, even in the US, I would call it like game-changing lawsuits where we found out a lot of these models were trained on like books and people's intellectual property. And the companies kind of were like, yeah, we'll pay the fine. The fine is pennies on the dollar, as opposed if it was a whole bunch of these individual cases. I am not so certain that we're not going to see the precedent where, like, one, how would you know that I trained the model on this unless you could attribute it? And as these companies have to pay out, I think it was Perplexity did they have? I don't want to get that wrong. Was that $1 billion suit?
I think it was more than that. I think it was like 4.
Was it? I know it was very large, and I'm just brain is scrambled.
I still think there's a second one ongoing too.
And so the point that I'm getting at is, if you can make more money than you have to pay for the fee, are we going to see commercial entities that will just steal the data? If I don't get caught. I mean, I'm not at all condoning that. I actually think this is really crazy, but like, in some, especially if you look in China, they are actually so good at some of this. I think everybody wants to harp on China. I think some places you just have to admire where good is happening. And one of those cases is there's a lot of moonlighting, right? There's people who are in the intelligence apparatus or military apparatus doing a mission. And then at night, they're making some side hustle, some scratch by doing some of these at night. If I'm a company trying to create an innovative model, do I really care where the data came from. Because once I train my model, it's in. And then my only risk is the fine bigger than the amount of money I'm going to make on it? If you really say and put your best like capitalist hat on, if it's all white collar crime and it's all stuff you can pay with cash, why would you as a business not hack into these businesses to steal this intellectual property, steal this data to give your model the advantage? Like, why wouldn't you do it? Because the result is so high. And right now the precedent so far is,
I mean, compared to what they make too, it's a slap on the wrist.
It is. So I don't think many are considering that, like, maybe the future of models is I just don't ask, don't tell. I don't want to know where my data came from, where my model came from. And I'm sure customers are going to pay for it. They're going to be like, this is amazing. I now, for sales, I can actually know exactly what that salary, or for recruiting, I want to get the best talent. I know exactly what they're making right now because somebody dumped that into the database. I don't know. I think these are things that we're just starting to get to, and something I'm purposely choosing the most egregious versions. But if you get some of the ones that are more like private, if you're thinking about who travels to certain places or how should I charge, electricity rates, if you could get an overall demographic of where people are at, like, what would stop a power company from saying, all right, I know those are 8A houses and I'm going to charge less. And over here, I know people are more to do. I'm going to charge substantially more. They already have some of this info. But what if it was no longer just a guess? It wasn't fuzzy. They actually knew. I'm not so certain capitalism doesn't actually and wouldn't encourage this, by the way. And I'm a huge fan of capitalism, but I'm just aware that these are double-edged swords. So obviously I'm getting a little far out there, but I think this is well beyond just national security apparatus. I think there are so many super creative ways that I think some data and some models we'll have to assume it's coming from some stolen data.
And that actually brings me to the second level of this is that when these companies, and again, this is a capitalist podcast, huge fan of it here. Like, where it's nothing, there's always going to be negatives when a system gets, because we're never true anything, So there'll always be these negatives. In this case, speaking of what you were just saying, you have countries that NVIDIA is 2 Canadas in terms of their GDP worth, essentially.
Yeah.
OpenAI, rumors are that it's going to IPO for $1 trillion.
Sure.
Largest IPO ever. And it may even be higher than that. And I'm sure within a year, it's going to be multitudes. You have these massive, massive companies that essentially are the same size as state actors. And they now can employ tactics like you're highlighting there, with both caps on, your Huntress cap on and your NSA cap on. Does that scare you as well, or does that change your outlook and just how this can all be handled too because of the power that these companies will be able to have?
Yeah, I'm going to do just for the naysayers, I'm going to do a dash of like the paranoid, and then I'm going to go to the upside. The dash of the paranoid, some of the things that I'm most worried about, and I recently got with the founder that's of a very large IT and cybersecurity company. Folks would know the name. And as he and I were talking about this, his biggest concern happened to overlap with my concern. And it was, what if, as the browser right now is largely owned by Google, yes, there's Safari, yes, there's Edge, it's largely Chrome. Google, for the most part, did minimal evil.
Yeah, that was an mission for a while.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, they definitely did some shady stuff. But for the most part, they did not true evil. But what if AI just chokes off? Like right now, we're even seeing like OpenAI just released a model that's tuned very much to cybersecurity off of data that we help feed to it. Right. So there is some negativity of this. And what's interesting is the evil side of this could be, what if people paying ads, what if they were the separation that separated you from your client? That's what this founder was very worried. And I'm talking tens of $1 billion, CEO behind this company. And he just asked a question. What if I can't get to my customers anymore because they're behind an abstraction that is an AI? Say it's Atlas, the new browser from OpenAI in this theoretical example. How could I reach them? How could I inform them? It will be up to OpenAI to decide who I win. Because right now, at least the model behind Google's ads has some level of fairness. You have to pay in bidding, but it's built on this. But when you're that big and you have a multi-trillion dollar that's larger, like you said, many Canadas, you start getting into a real wild scenario of like, maybe they don't have to behave like other companies. Maybe they can behave more like states. And if you think about the ability to influence countries, politicians, most of this stuff is still very heavily influenced by money. Do you have a politician running it, or do you actually, I mean, there's a lot of things that are favorable in this case. And so that's the negative side. I do see real chance that we might have a handful of AI providers that separate all businesses and even all people from the data and influence, even if it's not AGI. I think they could have that level. I mean, we're seeing it right now with people moving to what, you're either on Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT. I think for Western audiences, that's most of them, right?
Yeah, even with probably just ChatGPT, to be honest.
Yeah, you probably could have. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
Obviously there's tons of derivatives and there's tons of other models that, serve their own purposes. But the other side of that is, when people, for instance, are doing the gold rush, do you go pan gold with them, or do you jump on this bandwagon and figure out how to sell shovels? I think these new AI systems are going to create the equivalent of just generational wealth opportunities for founders, entrepreneurs, and people who can just abstract this away. So as long as it's still somewhat democratic, somewhat fair, I think it's going to be tolerable. And I actually think that's where the biggest risk to just world stability period is. What if they don't decide to be purely evil, but just evil enough that I'm able to taint, just evil enough that you feel that it's fair enough, not that it's truly evil. And I think that's going to be the way I look at it, Huntress is heavily leveraging. We're seeing the traffic move this way. We're seeing how people get their information. Even I'm watching my own personal behaviors and my children's behaviors start to move through these answer engines. And so you better believe I am leveraging and exploiting this as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm also aware that this could be, it could be like, hey, you gave me my first hit free and now I'm hooked. Mm-hmm. And that might come with bigger consequences. So if you can't tell, and I just gave the capitalism version of this, if you go the information flow where, totalitarian regimes have always been about control and flow of information, the great firewall that prevents, external communications in China, that isn't shit compared to the great. Can you explain what that
is in case?
Yeah. So if anybody in the audience doesn't know, there are some countries, and it's not just China, that are really, really good at controlling what does the outside world, how does the outside world influence your population? And so in China, there's quite a bit of their own social services that, and by social, I'm talking about social media services that don't let you have access to what people talk on Twitter or other news, et cetera. And it keeps it confined. It also protects them. It makes it harder for somebody shady like me to get in there and disrupt China's, what they're maybe if I want to do a social uprising, it's harder to influence that when you have a firewall of technology. So they have this, the great firewall. It's totally worth going out there. And I'm sure you could find an awesome podcast on it.
Yeah, about to look at a book or something, just find someone with that too, because that would be, even developing that's incredible, because I imagine when you're trying to get through that. But again, as you're saying, if a company is able to essentially create their own version of that, it changes the calculus completely.
So what if we didn't have a great firewall that limited what websites you could go to, but the version was not even people know they're being censored in China. People know in Iran they're being censored there. What if you don't know you're being censored because you just asked the answer engine and it feels like it's good? You feel like the answer. And I think this is where, if you look where human intelligence is going, true handlers, think of your, silent professionals, your Green Berets, your NSA, sorry, not your NSA, your CIA, why would you not be using AI to be able to reach assets? Mm-hmm. Why would you not be using AI to be able to influence? Even better, they just might think the AI told them to do it. They have no idea. So there's a lot that's behind. And I don't mean they get in the whole model, but it's still just an answer engine, just like Google. And if you can make it tell you the right things, but the difference is when you're seeing in all the psychology that if you get this and an answer from an answer engine, because it feels like a more human interaction, it's not just data, it's actually trying to talk to you. And the more it learns about you, you're giving it more inherent trust. So if you can't tell, like I'm both trying to use and abuse this at Huntress to make sure that when people are solving a cybersecurity problem, I can show up as credible as possible. I mean, I want people to know what I'm doing, and it gives me an unfair advantage to people who's not doing that. But if you go and find somebody unethical that wants to take that unfair advantage for something more malicious, oh gosh, it both gets really fun. There's going to be awesome movies about this, but it also gets very realistic. And I'm not so certain that we won't start seeing this out of smaller countries that want to have more influence. This is just, we've always had censorship. What better way to do it than your own? What I made, Venezuelan AI. Maybe that's a bad example, but I think you get the point that I'm making.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And I even think too, is that to be quite frank about, the LLM war that we're having between, like you said, with DeepSeek essentially popped out of nowhere one day with a lot of the same code. And it was like, okay, they definitely took it from OpenAI. And that was the conversation around that, is that we're in another pseudo Cold War, or like what we were talking about earlier of like the information war for militaries and everything like that would be like the same as the nuclear bomb. This is almost like the space race, where we're both racing to be the first to create AGI or just have the best AI model. But what's scary about that is that we're kind of not thinking of what the implications of that could be.
Yeah, we as in like civilian population probably, right?
Well, even if you're in OpenAI or everything, it's like you want to iterate, you want to create the best model. You're not necessarily thinking about like what happens if this model starts, if you have it running in internet systems, it starts making the decisions of, well, this person's really interested in this topic. That's all I'm going to show them.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of brilliant folks that are thinking about safety of these systems. I do think these questions are asked. I think the nuances that people are possibly like missing with these AI systems, say regardless if DeepSeek was stolen, I think there's a real likelihood that brilliant Chinese researchers could also create something like this. If you look at the quality of what they're doing, like
they have great,
you can't underestimate their talent, regardless of where it came from. If I wanted to control people or if I wanted to control things, why would having a model that is remarkably cheap to train and update matter? Well, instead of me giving you access to communications equipment, what if I gave, maybe Venezuela can't create its own AI, so I'll just give you our DeepSeek equivalent, but it's the version for you. I mean, if you have these tools, you can then give them for free. You know that nothing is for free, right? If it's for free, you're the product, not the, not the actual consumer. And the part that I'm getting at is I'm not so certain that we're not playing the level of chess right now where we did all this protections against like, okay, what if guarding against AGI? And the things that we might have missed is what if we didn't create AGI, but we now created this really great answer engine. And now that answer engine can be given away for very cheap, and it can be used to control populations' points of view. Because while some in the US for capitalism, we might want to do this to make money, help productivity. But if I was playing the long game, the type of country that's on their 15th or 20th 5-year plan, why would you not want to have influence on use this AI engine to make sure I can have, influence your decisions, your answers, etc. Like that's how I would play the long game. I would not play checkers. I would play chess, and I would make sure that my biggest pieces are like, even if I don't get AGI, I'm still controlling how your population feels and gets answers to data, etc.
And that's the scary part. If we're talking, just pick any state actor, and it's like they have these systems. There's one side that is very scared of. You have like an Elon Musk and even like there's a huge group of people that have come out recently to try to stop AI research because they're worried that we're moving quick. And again, you go on YouTube or Twitter and they're like, oh, in the next year it's going to be here. And it's like, probably not, but we're moving quick. And that brings up the kind of if you have the button and the world, like, do you click it? as we move quicker, some of these other state actors may not be thinking. It's like the worry becomes exactly what you're saying. It's like, are they going to be making these negative decisions, or do they create a model smart enough that gets close to that realm that starts doing its own decisions? And then that's another complex layer. Like the whole race there is just, it's incredible because again, there's just so many dynamics that carry into it.
And it could be fine. It could be really fine. Like one of my favorite phrases though is that people overestimate what you can accomplish in a year and underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years. Earlier, I gave an example where I said 15 years. And the reason for that, I generally think that not only do people underestimate what happens in 5, if you allow 5 to happen 3 times in a row, it's usually the point where you get really surprised. Things are just so radically different. And so for me, like it could be radically epic and amazing. I mean, I'm still realistic. I told you that story before we started about my daughter crashing her Tesla and everything else. And it's nowhere close to self-driving. It's augmented. And maybe we stick there because maybe it's just so hard to get across the finish line. The point that I keep driving home is maybe it doesn't have to be AGI to still cause the type of massive riff. And the fact that we have these things compounding at the same time, where if we have a quantum compute breakthrough, at the same time, we're getting much better at our own power generation. We're getting much better at like chip density. There's a lot of manufacturing happening right now in material sciences that are allowing like semiconductors to behave differently. Like things could move very, very fast. And the thing behind it is, I think some level you have to just choose like, do you want to like worry about all this stuff, or do you just try to get on being a good person? Like, yeah, I at the same time is while I'm geeking with you, right? Hardcore geeking with you, I still just try. My biggest problems are like, I can't get people to not click on microcroft.com. All right. They don't look enough to notice it's not Microsoft. Right. So
good one for you just to know they're starting to do 2 R's to look like an M.
I've seen, R and an N sometimes as well, that little R plus the lowercase N. And you're just like, gosh, dang, I didn't even think about this,
it looks good.
Typo squatting and brand jacking. And, I fall for the scrap too. And I'm a super geek. So
no, I mean, I think that's a fantastic point too. It's like, it's funny because having a podcast where I bring on people from all over different backgrounds and stuff, but a lot of times and, covert ops and everything, it's like, we'll bring on the show and we'll be talking and we're like, shit, we haven't thought about this in a while. And you're looking at what's going on. But, at the end of the day, you go back, you live your normal life, you're working towards bettering yourself. And, a lot of people, whatever their job is, like they're just trying to move by. But that is the other worry too. It's like when you do sit down and talk about stuff sometimes, that makes you think, you're like, man, hopefully there are bigger brains out there that are looking at this day to day. And a lot of them are, but
and I'm not so certain it's not AI that keeps us from like really hurting ourselves. Like that is also a possibility. And we're not there yet. But I can tell you, like, there's a reason that word co-pilot is affiliated with so many AI products these days. Like a co-pilot doesn't mean you can't crash a plane. It's just a second perspective, a second set of eyes, and sometimes a place to prevent you from really like dorking things up. I'll tell you, like my nightmare with all this crazy automation, like I have millions of computers that run my software. I think it's like 8 million Microsoft 365 identities. That's what you log in. So you think about the massive amount of data I sit on, and I've got 2 big things. What if I'm the one? Like I'm a ripe target for being. So the amount of like internal wargaming we do to make sure our own data doesn't, like that is my nightmare fuel of like, what if Shady Kyle on the other country is going, I'd like access to those computers. What could I learn from them? At the same time, I think, is there a greater good? Like what can I do with AI and learning? Like we're stumbling onto stuff that we didn't even realize. Like we do this stuff like education and awareness training. And that's a commoditized market. Many people know you need to get educated. But the funny part about it is just like the AI example we gave earlier of sometimes other stuff happens and you don't know it's going to happen. Like we ended up learning that by people taking our trainings, we just started studying what device they were using. Not the computer work device, but like what personal device they were using when they do these trainings at home. And while the corporate networks were like secure and hardened, We were looking at stuff that I was like, this is a 15-year-old browser.
Nokia.
Like, how is it possible? It turned out it was like an old point of sale machine that somebody had a gas station and they were doing their awareness training on this. And I'm like dying inside and going, that was not a tax service I even thought of. So there's some of this where I'm like, AI should help me. I can, help me process this data. And the other side of it, I'm going, man, I just need to go touch grass some days and go hop in a car and go drive at the track or something. Cause sometimes I just need a break from this nonsense.
How have you been surprised on how much it's developed for maybe wargaming and stuff over just the past couple of years? I mean, I feel like the sophistication has had to be from 2020 or 2019, let's say, to now for that purpose.
Simulating tradecraft is getting so good. And it's not just like, I'll ungeek it for a little bit. The fact that we're seeing AI solve problems based on data sets that now that we're starting to funnel a lot of data. And what's nice is not everything's connected to the internet. Not everything's going to turn into HAL and kill us. But we're finding sometimes that in these war games, these were paths that were achievable, but not to like you and I. They make no sense to you and I. There's these compounds or scenarios where you're like, nobody in real life would do it. And the AI's like, I'm not bound by your limited knowledge. And so, yeah, there's like huge benefits of this stuff. We're realizing things in healthcare. We're realizing things definitely in cybersecurity where we're like, I didn't even know that was like, I'm a career hacker. That's all I've done. That's, besides raising kids and hacking, that's about the only two things I'm pretty okay at. And meanwhile, I still see, AI sometimes just makes up its own BS answer. Sometimes will just give me a sucker punch. And I'm like, okay, it got like 80% of that right. And now I can pull that last 20%. So you can't tell, like, I'm both really happy with these scenarios, especially like the ones that are helping us like better secure national security. Dude, I'll take brains wherever it comes from, even if it comes from a NVIDIA chip. I'm good. All right. I'll take it. I just hope that, that it stays like that
manageable.
Way. Yeah.
And the people behind it are using it for like the right reasons.
Yeah, because even I shared earlier that I used to do these competitive hacking competitions. That was a big part of me coming up. I did it at NSA. I won on NSA, it was an NSA and multi other countries team that we won. And what's wild about these is while that hacking competition still kind of happens, the real big ones where the real big like bounties or like prize money, they're all autonomous systems that fight each other. They're all AI systems that try to hack each other.
Really?
Yeah. So the DARPA Grand Challenge or the Cyber Grand Challenge, these were like $1 million grants, and the humans aren't even allowed to touch the system now. This is already happening. It's actually a couple years old.
That's incredible.
So even though I was humans versus humans in the top 20 teams worldwide from, you name it, Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, plenty of Russian teams, Chinese teams, lots of Americans and defense contractors, we'd all fight it out in a room and we could see each other. And now some of the competitions are actually purely autonomous. You're not even allowed to touch it. It's AI system against AI system.
And even then, is there a worry that like, if you're putting your best AI system out there and you're competing against other users, like they're using this as an opportunity to scout what your AI like they?
I mean, the U.S. government is probably putting these scenarios going back to recruiting. There's no better way. Like, even if they only have to pay one winner, I believe the terms of service allowed them to have access to all of the entries. It goes back to recruiting, man. It's just a really creative ways to get these things going. So I didn't even think about that in our earlier segment, but
that's incredible. Let me transition to some of these new like military in the private sector and public sector, kind of a combination of the two, but you have like an Anduril and you have like a Palantir. From your perspective, looking at that again from like a just national security threat and just everything that like Anduril, they just released Eagle Eye. Did you see that?
I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's the demo. I've never touched the hardware, but I've seen probably the same video and same write-ups you've seen.
So does it worry you how technologically or how much technology we're starting to use in kind of these ground combat? Because again, I
personally think it was the only answer that could happen. I'll tell you, like when people don't even realize for hacking, especially in the military, there's lots of different flavors of hacking. Some hacking is, they call it CT, counterterrorism. So my job is finding bad guys, and we don't even create an uninstaller. The uninstallation is going to happen when a bomb drops on the bad guy. And that rocked my world the first time I realized I was creating software to more or less erase somebody. Like that was a weird example. But I also, when I started realizing like, oh, the counterterrorism mission is going to go this way, it was about the same time different firms, might have been an Israeli firm, discovered that like when we're sending all these signals, Wi-Fi through the walls, you could actually see how it bounces back. And you can start, not a perfect picture, but you start understanding where human bodies are. And then as you started seeing the drone technology take off, definitely since February 2022, it's completely changed of, drone warfare. This is the only way it was going to go. So the idea of wearing glasses and being able to infer different data sets to know where they are to make sure, the guy on the other side of the Connex or container gets taken out first. Like, I think it was the only place it was ever going to go. I don't think you can put that back in. Like there's no putting that back in the box. Because even if you outlawed it, then only the criminals are going to have it or the nation states that want to have it.
Yeah. Like again, we're always at this race war with global superpowers, Russia, China. And it's like, yeah, it's funny because the more complex we get, from someone in your position, the more there's like open doors there for other nation actors, maybe, be able to take advantage of our technology or anything like that, versus the idea where you're saying like a lot of people, war is still going to be fought 2 boots on the ground.
Yeah. But it's definitely augmented now. I mean, I spend a lot of time studying both sides, especially in Western news. Russia gets a bad rap. Like sometimes they're getting the crap kicked out of them by the Ukraine. Like they might throw bodies at it, but they are very sophisticated. A lot more success is happening in Russia or in Ukraine by Russia than most Western media will claim. But while I'm watching both sides figuring out how to kill each other better, the stuff that's on my mind is not how that will settle, but like, gosh, sometimes like we would joke at NSA that sometimes it's just best not saying something because when you don't say something, believe it or not, like some secrets actually just stay secret. It's not a whole lot of them. But you sometimes say things into existence. And what shocks me is we've had multiple now, like, attempts at assassinations, things in the US, different politicians, et cetera. How has not one of them been from a drone yet? Like, because we can't go watch the videos, not just fly by wire, et cetera, like the one that's fiber optic control. But even before everything was fiber optic drones, there's a lot you can do with a $500 DJI drone. And enough that you can do with ChatGPT and jailbreaking it to give you bad answers. I don't see how, and there's not what you're going to call your local police department because somebody just disappeared. They blew up because somebody hit them with a drone. Like we have no preparation to handle this type of stuff right now. So it's the things that I don't want to speak that type of stuff to existence, but the only answer is it will happen. Yeah. It has to happen because the idea is already out there. It just takes time.
Yeah, and I mean, in Mexico right now,
cartels for sure.
Yeah, they love using them, and it's like I've had tons of guys on that are either people that are doing operations down there, people that are adjacent, like working in the U.S., because people don't realize how prolific cartel operations are actually in the U.S. It's crazy, and they'll do the same thing in the U.S. as well. But both areas use drones as essentially scouts. They'll drop grenades.
Phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. I actually think the narco, both anti-narco activities as well as the cartel activities are probably some of the biggest learners from Ukraine so far. And it's brutal because especially as we've started to poke further and further into Mexico and some of these other countries, they've brought the war to the U.S. because it's a lot crazier for us to deal with the war here in the U.S. And so I don't think we realize like border towns and stuff along those lines, like, doesn't take much to make some of these like flying death machines. And I don't even think they have to be sexy. They don't have to be like AI controlled. You see some of these, new UAVs that are going to have command and control, talk to 50 other UAVs to act as a defensive shield. Exactly. Where you just go back to that $5 wrench that I talked about. In this case, it's not a $5 wrench. It's a $500 DJI drone that can get the job done the same way. And again, I love the technology because dang, nothing better than having hot, a slice of pizza delivered to my front door by a drone. But at the same time, there's a double-edged sword. So yeah, if you can't tell, like your original thing that got us down here was like, could this happen? Should this happen? I believe it has to happen, and not because I want it to, but once the cat's out of the bag, it's never going back in.
Yeah, because there's so much opportunity there as well, and what the equipment provides. I mean, it is funny, isn't the right word. It's always so hard having these conversations about stuff happening over there because it's profoundly interesting. But you're obviously talking about war and everything. So, but seeing the drones with the cable wires that are just running through, and like some fields will just be entirely covered in wires, and it's
fiber optic wires all over the place.
And it's unbelievable seeing that from, even like you said, 2022, when everything just started to transition, and just how it's the first war where it's really become kind of a mainstay of what that war is actually looking like, is just utilizing these different technologies and how can we best use them. And like you said, like some drones are cheap little drones and they're able to take down a whole unit like that. It's like crazy.
I mean, I know it's just morbid, but you watch a handful of these, people don't escape. A good, drone pilot, like, you don't escape this. I don't think, I don't think anybody is going to be able to stop this right now. So anyways, maybe there's something that's more positive than technology ruining people.
Well, but, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, that's, I guess, even bringing it back to the original question with just these companies like Anduril and Palantir and just all the autonomous and different technology we're bringing in. It's like, it's incredible to see it move there. But again, just like everything, it's bringing so many new obstacles and so many new opportunities for, and I guess it makes, if you're in the NSA, it makes your job even more interesting. But
I think it also just means like we have probably never had a need for better diplomacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like some of this, like, we're putting a lot of effort, and it's always this way. Some of the best innovation often comes with whether it's space race or a war, and that's terrible that happens that way. But part of me is like, can't we kind of just get along a little bit? Like, but do you have to because so-and-so might create this? I think diplomacy is going to be huge. I mean, we're even seeing this right now. Like so my company gets to see a lot of good things and I get to see a lot of bad things, a lot of people getting hacked. So like my board is super excited. They get to see, I protect thousands of new companies per month, like 3,000 or 5,000 companies per month. But when we go out on the dark web, there's like 20,000 new companies hacked per month. Huntress is like absolutely failing at our mission. We're making money, but like we're not keeping up with cybercrime right now at all. And I think whether you go to this example like Palantir and stuff along those lines, part of me is like, I know why they're going to do it, because they have to respond, and we don't want to be the one that's not keeping up. Like, I'm personally feeling like guilty that I'm not keeping up with my own company mission, and Palantir is just rising to the occasion. They're seeing that they have a national security threat. They're allowing themselves to come up with whatever unbounded scenario, and they're building tools. But as we build tools, somebody else is going to respond, and it's going to be a wild one, man.
Your perspective on Palantir too, because I think it's become like the boogeyman over the past year or so. And we could actually dive in this in a little bit as well too, because I thought the way that you articulated the Snowden case as well, and kind of like
on a past podcast,
on Team House, and it's like all these situations and all this stuff that people are just getting headlines on now. They'll see it and they'll immediately, the Palantir surveillance state, right? That comes out. That's a huge headline that's going all around and everyone's freaking out. The Snowden case, again, as you kind of broke it down, like everyone sees the movie that comes out for it and they read some articles and they think they know.
Yep, they're experts.
Exactly. Starting with Palantir, it's when you hear that surveillance state, like what does that build in your mind, and like what would you actually think their approach is? Because they're clearly there for a net benefit, at least, or the government sees an opportunity with them to work.
Yeah. So the things that don't scare me is the individual technologies. What I mean by that is an individual technology will always have flaws. There are cases where, for the most part, our legal system still generally works. You might have to wait a couple of elections. Sometimes you have to wait for different personalities, like, things change in the world because people die off. That's a crude, scenario, but as politics change because, people's general values change. We'll see some of these things get regulated. I'm not worried about the surveillance state from a pure technology standpoint. What I find very interesting, and this is both good for us at the US, but as long as we're talking about US abroad, Palantir and other companies like them appear to be learning to iterate and innovate so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually like having one time that you come up with something and thwarting something like that or getting around or having a law for it. But when you have somebody whose job is to think with the hacker mindset that I said earlier, here's a problem, you told me I can't do this and I'm going to prove it. It's really hard to regulate somebody who is actively trying to use their brain and innovation and okay, you set a law, I'm going to work around it. I mean, look at this stuff that we've seen with just like, you talked about the silencers. There's always been a way to go make a silencer right now, right? You see the Glocks with the little triggers on the back end that turn them into, automatic pistols real quick, or the bump stocks. That's the cat and mouse. But what's wild is I don't think, the government has always been kind of slow and stodgy. When we talk about military grade, we're not talking about the best quality. Usually it's like the lowest paid bidder is the joke, right? But you're seeing a whole different thing. And some of the technology that's coming out, it's like, whoa, we're seeing a very modern government contractor who can iterate and innovate and adapt. So even if these things, and I actually think that if it was this, hey, look, we're going to spy on every U.S. conversation, very similar to like what Russia monitors, or at least the FSB side of Russia tends to have a pretty good idea of what's happening in country. And the thing that's really wild about that is we now have a company in our country that if it did go that route, they'd be able to innovate very fast. And I think that should at least give people pause. I'm not saying be scared of it, but fully consider like the scary part is not they have this technology or they have a surveillance state thing, because you can curb those again with laws and, votes, et cetera. But what happens when the laws can't keep up with the state of innovation or the collaborate? That's what's happening to me in cybercrime right now. I have a team of hackers that is trying to outpace other hackers' brilliance. And that is a really hard war to win, because it's not like, think about the statement of rocket science, or I'm going to shoot a rocket to the moon. Yeah, the moon moves, but you know what? Gravity isn't changing every 2 seconds, right? Humans are brilliant and they adapt. And I think that's the biggest worry to me if something like that truly went evil. I'm not saying it even is evil right now, but we can see, it doesn't take much creativity to say, oh, what if you tweak this idea and now you armed local police departments with this technology and they shot first and asked later. I could see how that technology can be abused. So my point is, I think we're just going to have to see what happens, but I don't think we're in any sort of, the theoretical is there now. I don't think we're should go full tinfoil hat yet, but we should at least give pause and think about what we're creating.
Yeah, obviously Trump's a very polarizing president.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that feel one way or another. And with that, of course, becomes when these conversations come up, people are going to immediately go to one side or another of this is the biggest deal ever. And I guess that's exactly what you're saying there. It's like when used for the right use cases and with the mindset of America first, and it can be a beautiful thing. And it's like, if an improper actor comes in and is able to take advantage of it.
And I think improper actor is very much can be left or right.
100%.
And that's the fun part about it. Like, the thing about like America First, or if you track any of, Uncle Elon's both good and crazy thoughts at times, some of the stuff that I enjoy, probably more of the Andrew Yang version of it, is like, look, I'm not looking to run left. I'm not looking to run right. I need this country to run forward, right? I think there's actually there's so much more that like unites us than divides us. But damn, if we find a way to like polarize the stupidest stuff sometimes. But the things that really worry me about the case that you just brought up is I think as different sides, say the right, create something that allows the current version of defense contractors to be able to spy on whatever. Well, when the next election happens and the right is no longer there, and we see this for the whole history of our country, it's moved from each side. The left is going to create their own equivalent of this and do the same darn thing. Like it's happened. And I think there's just some of this stuff that I'm not 100% certain we think about these of like, oh yeah, go ahead, move forward, run with that. But to pretend that like, both parties aren't going to do what's best for their own parties is crazy. That is
100%.
absolute, insanity. So that's probably where I'm like, again, I think this technology is super brilliant. Like you gave the example of,
The eagle eye.
the eagle eye is just so like,
It's fascinating.
I mean, it reminds me of stuff that like I used to play GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 and stuff like that, the technology and things. And you're going, man, this is just really neat. But then on the other side, you got to remember like, oh yeah, that's loss of life that's happening on the other side. And I don't think, again, it's all fun and games till it becomes like, there was a reason that I didn't work like on the FBI side. I don't think I could do domestic politics. I like my, foreign adversaries, I'm America through and through, but if I had to go and decide like what worked internally, like, nah, that ain't for me. So,
if you could delineate how again, we've had FBI agents direct, we've had CIA case officers direct, like, that are obviously like working on the ground more, but I have to imagine those agencies also have their own like hacking communities and everything. Like what?
Well, that's actually good. People don't talk about this. Yeah.
How would you delineate those three and kind of like both capabilities and what also, differs between?
Yeah. So what's nice is, right, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, people don't realize just how large it is. With ODNI, right, the Director of National Intelligence oversees, it's like 18, 20 nowadays, different intelligence agencies. But the big ones everybody knows, it was always FBI, it was always CIA, and now NSA has become a little bit sexier. It's in the age of the geek. My kids think it's cool to be a hacker now. It was not cool when I was in school. It was not at all. And the thing that I'm getting at is every one of those 18 to 20 agencies have their own mission, right? Treasury has their own intelligence mission, right? People forget like these little tiny oddity type things that they'll have their own. And the reality is like CIA is human intelligence all day, every day, from the time that sucker was founded till probably forever and ever, amen. The difference is they're not going to be left behind. And so they use cyber capabilities to further their human mission. And as a result, their cyber capabilities don't look like NSA's capabilities. And they sure as hell don't look like FBI's capabilities. What's wild is people forget like DEA is also one of these. Like, my deployment to Afghanistan, the last one I went, we definitely had multiple, narcotics guys on the team that were from DEA. They had their own cyber. And ironically, a lot of theirs was much more targeted towards like current today. Probably be very anti-drone. It'd probably be different levels, cell phone jamming, things that's actually enabling some of these. Probably a lot more like how do we exploit radio signals to be able to find the narco tunnels and things like that.
I'm sure even crypto transfers too, because that's how they were
so
moving their
much.
money.
100%. And everybody, it would be crazy to think that all of these agencies aren't looking at the blockchain history somehow. But I imagine CIA's is probably looking at who's moving. It's probably looking at who lost a wallet, because guess what? If you just lost a wallet, you probably need some money and you're probably susceptible to influence. And you imagine DEA is probably looking at, they don't care who just lost money. They want to know who's moving it. How many hops is it moving? Can we track these? And so my point is cyber between all these agencies, and NSA obviously is signals intelligence. Most traditional hacking that is signals intelligence, I would say traditional hacking looks like NSA hacking. It's using things like email. It's using access to large amounts of data. It is what it is. But the things that I find much more sexy, and sadly I spent almost all my time at NSA, are the people who are using cyber to accomplish their mission, like special forces. Their cyber flavor is way different. For instance, we were using a lot of the signals skills that I had. Like when you have in a meat house and you're setting somebody up for like a meat, I'm there looking for foreign intelligence bugs. I'm doing a spectrum analyzer and sweeping the house to make sure that's absolutely fine. That's, also denying all signals around, making sure that if they have an IED or something on them, that signal is not coming in Unless, I don't know, maybe they have a fiber optic cable tethered to them. You know, I don't think I've seen any of those, but you know, maybe that's
maybe
something,
soon. Yeah.
you know, we see somebody dragging fiber cables, but like, okay, I'll just deny every signal coming in here. We were probably all getting cancer, but it's better to die later than now. And so the point that I'm getting at is every one of these FBI's mission is local surveillance. I never worked on like FISA type things where like sometimes NSA had to use a FBI authority to be able to do it because maybe someone involved in the other end, even if they're a bad guy, could be a US citizen, right? NSA can't look at that, so they'd have to work with the FBI. But I gotta imagine like the remote operations unit is the offensive cyber capability of the FBI. And although I haven't done like serious time over there, I know that a lot of the capabilities when I was like helping buy exploits and buy technology, buy cyber weapons, were very much focused on de-anonymizing. Child porn rings, kiddie porn ring type stuff like that. Different people doing like drugs, you know, Silk Road type stuff. It was all about let me, you're anonymous till you're not. Let me uncloak you. Let me find a bug in your software stack so now I can find you and actually put you in jail. So I know that's a very long way of answering your question, but you can't tell every department has specialized. Well, NSA's is very broad and like, I got to do all the signals. Everybody else has got really targeted. And from what I understand, if you want to talk to people that, you know, like people forget, even though we have Treasury, do you know which intelligence agency is focused on actually like counterfeit?
Oh yeah.
It's a weird one. Most people don't get it.
God, what is it? It's not a.
I won't keep you hanging. That's actually a really good example, or a really good guess, but it's actually Secret Service.
Okay.
It's weird, right? You're like, how did that end? Why didn't that end up at Treasury? Why not IRS? Like all these would have made sense. Secret Service happens to have that. And what's neat is you could imagine as a result, they're looking at things, for instance, like counterfeit. There's not really counterfeit Bitcoin. But you can imagine their technologies and use of cyber is a completely different. They want to follow the money. They want to follow plates. They want to follow currency coming in. In some ways, you got to be able to just know it all. And so if you can't tell, every branch is using right now, not only the military services like Air Force OSI, the Office of Special Investigations, they have their own very specific flavor of cyber. And what I'm loving is outside of NSA, people get focused. And when I get to meet operators, you know, talking about like barrel-chested freedom fighter type, these are some of the most creative people ever. And sadly, me and my geeks will sit in rooms and we might come up with the technical solutions, but the real creativity, I was with a, Army guy, let's not pick on him too bad, but, with an Army operator, and he's describing to me of how would we deny, like if we wanted to go, and this is purely theoretical, if we wanted to go and deny access to a country's ability to succeed at the Olympics, how would we do it? And ironically, the first thing he said, and I'm sitting here thinking about like, could I climate control? Could I affect their sleep? Can I whatever? And he's like, no, I'd start immediately. I would start extorting and their kids on social media. I would start doing this. I would start putting, I would manufacture an affair with their wife in this and make sure that when that athlete goes to run, they're not in peak mentals. That was a whole nother level of like use of cyber for a completely different purpose. And I was like, you are sick. But I respect your creativity, and you're right. And their ideas were actually better than mine, mine were super geeky. I was coming down and I was like, man, we could think about implantation. We could think about micro stuff. We could think about I'm thinking about can we put something in their blood? Can we really start doing stuff? Can we, magnetism, crazy stuff like that? No, they're like, yeah, I'm just going to stress their family to the point they can't run. That's wild, right? And so cyber, if you can't tell, it's an all domain tool now. It's not just one.
So how much is there cross-pollination between the two? Like, are you guys sharing technologies, or technologies getting developed in-house that are more specific to agencies? I would say
they're oddly exclusive, and for the right reasons. If you're using a technique, they're a lot like you have to manage your commodities, right? You have to treat it as like, I have an asset, and if this asset gets burned, not a person, but like a technique, it's going to hinder my mission. So believe it or not, it's very compartmented. There is sharing, like during my time, even there was a lot of discussion and kind of like sometimes the contractors, hey, I worked at Booz Allen today and now I'm supporting CIA, but I lost the contract. Tomorrow I'm now at FBI. So there is pollination that happens that way. But the actual, like the diehard mission stuff is impressive sometimes how small and how compartmented. Like my co-founders, all three of us were NSA guys. Almost never did all of us work on the same mission, or even when we knew each other's parts, we didn't actually know together how it was going to be used, which is the brilliance of compartmented operations to make sure that they're resilient so they don't break. But as a result, a lot of agencies don't collaborate.
Would there be situations, I've seen this in the past too, where it's like DIA, or for the human, DEA would be working on this cartel operator, the CIA is working on, and you guys kind of gotta.
Yeah. I mean, I was forward deployed to CJ Sodaface, a combined joint special operation task force, Afghanistan. We had every flavor of us on there. I picked on the Navy guys the most. The SEALs were always the most, macho and boisterous. Yeah. I loved both the Deltas and the Green Berets. They were freaking wild, just how professional they could be. But we were having to use all of each other's experience at the end of the day to get the mission done. So that was actually neat, not just from the kinetic side, but we've even had like some of the most exciting, like people, it's public. It's not classified or anything creepy like that. But Nellis Air Force Base is known for doing adversary emulation. It's not atypical to look at and say like, what aircraft is flying up there? Because that doesn't look like a U.S. aircraft. And it's known. They do all kinds of different adversary simulations. And so what's neat is oftentimes even our collaboration is actually mimicking. Like I actually had a country that I was an expert at, and I would often work sometimes with other services to be able to emulate that adversary so they could test their both offenses and defenses against me. And so it's pretty neat. The same thing in the National Guard. We actually specialize and not just work with ourselves as like our intelligence apparatus, our NATO allies. So my state partner in Maryland is Estonia. And so if you think about it, that is right up on the border of Russia, et cetera. And that was a wild for me to be able to help them mature and beat up. And obviously, they're still they're still a foreign country, yet we have a shared adversary. So I couldn't share no foreign intelligence, but there was a lot of intelligence that we used to share and simulate, and we would learn lessons from them that was so much closer to homegrown. And despite, the US, we tend to throw a lot of money at it to solve brain power. Some of the best ideas come from the people who don't have a ton of that financial resources, but their ideas are much more efficient. And that's, again, $5 wrench sometimes just gets the job done a lot better than the, bajillion-dollar solution.
So with that too, I guess the opposition of that would be, right, if you find you guys are both working such and such individual, CIA is on one side, you're on the other. Does that, when that happens, are you guys both not looking to burn assets? So you're kind of playing the game there as well?
It is not atypical in the world of intelligence gathering to have numerous intelligence sources on one same asset. And oftentimes you don't know, is that an ally? Is that maybe like, again, NSA had some pretty top high-end stealth technology. Like we're known for being the super geeks on that end. So for me, who my job was long-term persistent access, I would need to be there. And part of my job was knowing and having a good idea who else is there. It could be a cyber criminal. It could be a script kiddie, somebody who just hacked and got lucky. It could be a bot, like an automated piece of software that happened to abuse on the same way I did. It could be other foreign adversaries. And that is a crazy world, because when it goes to the equities business of I've got these things that I'm worried, I don't want to be using some stuff that's only me, because I know they're there. They might know I'm there and I might not know. So you can imagine there has to be some level of deconfliction. But when I just said we're so compartmented, we didn't even know each other, like it's imperfect. It has to be imperfect. So if you can't tell, like, it's a wild thing. I imagine if you're a nuclear reactor in Iran, there's probably a lot of people sitting on your infrastructure. That's probably not just the US either. There's also probably different flavors of US on there. Like you can imagine that. So it's a weird world out there. And that's something that the physical kinetic guys, right? Your operators, like you can see somebody and you might have, and it's not atypical to have, two sources you're handling. Sometimes you'll have, red on red or blue on blue, where you accidentally somebody you're handling and somebody you're handling kills two people and you're like, oh, those were both our assets. Like that's known to happen in the physical world. It's just really weird that in the cyber world, nobody's killing each other, but you all kind of are like staring, looking at each other a little bit. So it's weird.
Yeah.
That's the only words I can say.
It's funny you putting it like that because I'm imagining too, like I've said, like I had James Lawler on, and he talked about a case where he had an asset and then they eventually found out that the boss of this asset had also become an asset to a different CIA agent, and he didn't know. And they were eventually like, it came to fruition at some meeting or something. And again, it was like, they're kind of in the room staring at each other, slowly being like, wait a minute, like we're all actually on the same side. And it's that similar case where it's like, you're looking in, it's like, is this a Mossad agent? Is this a Russian agent? Is this another US agent? Like, and you kind of got to play that game too. Cause again, when you get to the global infrastructure hacking and everything, I imagine there's so many cooks in the kitchen.
I think of that Spider-Man meme where everybody's like, you know, you. I mean, that's sometimes how it feels. So no, you nailed it. And that actually is a really good example of, yeah, it might be everybody's cool in the room, but it's sometimes hard to be able to feel like, okay, we are cool. We're okay. We can test. But that's, I mean, in the world of tradecraft, because it's so unique in cyber, you might, even if you're with multiple US intelligence agencies, you might not want to use your best because you don't want to arm somebody else that's going to use it, get caught, and then now you don't have that technique anymore. It's really interesting if you think of that way. You might be like, nah, I'm not trusting the Navy. You know, NCIS, sorry, not trusting you with my best, you know, techniques.
Let me put the question on you then, because I always ask the Delta guys for Delta versus DevGuru. If we put you guys in a hackathon, all the agencies, who do you think's winning?
If the outcome is just hackathon, NSA is winning. But if the outcome is something that has to enable a kinetic effect, like I gave the example earlier, Ukraine's not falling just because of it. I actually don't think NSA would get it done because we're so theoretical in the sense of like, we're so dedicated to technical tradecraft. I think sometimes we're a little bit further away from the actual, like, what does it take to get the mission done? Or we're just going to technical our way through there, that I actually think other agencies would have more creativity and they would get it done. They'd still probably call us for the technical know-how. But I really, again, straight up hackathon, there's a reason that all the math and, you know, pasty nerds like me, you know, there's a reason Huntress was headquartered at Fort Meade. We just happened to live there. And when we stopped working for the government, you know, a handful of years later, we started Huntress.
So continuing with that then, I guess looking at some of our, I mentioned Snowden earlier. The NSA obviously gets a really bad rap in terms of like what happened with the Snowden situation. But again, I wanted to start with that.
Are you talking about some of the stuff that was like, hey, there was some very strong in some of the leaks, like very strong insinuations, if not confirmations of like, whoa, this looks like NSA spying on US citizens, right?
Exactly. Because again, I don't think people think CIA. They don't think that there's any type of cyber there. Like they just think the NSA. And if you ask anyone on the street, they'll say they're
exactly
Big Brother.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When ironically, I mean, obviously we didn't know we were going to cover this topic, but NSA literally doesn't have the ability to look within the US, but people also forget like, well, what if a bad person comes to the US? Well, you got to collaborate. But this is some of the, to me, the biggest failures in this stuff is like, I personally couldn't work for a mission like that. It would eat me up. I don't like it. And my mom too, she was always like, you're reading my emails, Kyle. And I'm like, Mom, nobody gives a fuck what recipes you're sending back and forth. You know, even the spiciest, I might not want to see that, Mom, but like, there's no world on that end. But I think you get to see like from NSA that like used to be like when I first started was no such agency type. They were so bad at PR. They couldn't even get themselves out of that hole. And I think NSA somewhat deserves still the reputation that they got. Like Snowden smeared them. And the one thing he did really well is he guessed right that both the government leaders and the administration weren't going to clear up the story because they're so secretive. So I actually think it's pretty understandable why people have skepticism. At the same time, I can tell you straight face, like it was the single most ethical place I ever worked. But I think it's their fault. I don't think we had enough stick up for ourselves. And as a result, it is still FBI. FBI's job. It's public. There's not some secret whatever, although there are like FISA courts that are technically secret courts as well. FBI's job is to look at the US, just like your local law enforcement is to look at you. And so if you're really internally, it's not to say NSA won't get involved, but even when NSA is looking, at least when I was there, from what I understand, it's, hey, crap, you got to find an adversary that made it to the US, or it's a US person doing something bad abroad. And then the other scenario was the example I gave you earlier of like, hey, they might call us and ask us for help, but obviously it's not NSA people doing it. It's like some FBI operator doing their thing.
Yeah. And I imagine, and again, like you kind of pointed this out, and I've heard some other things as well, where it's like the Snowden thing, again, media runs with it. And there's, just like with any case, there's going to be a lot that eventually comes out of what really happened and everything there. And it's the other idea too, where it's like people want to take the pretty picture, and there's evidence that pops up in the sense of like there is technology the NSA has, but all these agencies have profound technology, and it's like the use cases behind it as well. It's so easy to jump to what we think would be the most dramatic cause in those situations.
But man, perception is reality, right? I mean, I even if I know the actual truth, I can still level with somebody of like, I know, I totally get why you feel that way. I mean, look, we just even had that even with still some of the like the JFK files, right? Like that was a bajillion years ago, a whole lifetime ago. And we just got some clarity of what happened on these. And it turned out it was like some of the most boring stuff in the world. We finally got clarity, but like when you allow perception to be the reality, can you fault somebody? I'm actually a little surprised. Like with so many things that were declassified and stuff, I really thought this administration might be like, I mean, even if I was just playing like tit for tat, the right could blame it on the left. This happened underneath the Obama administration or the Biden. Look what this had. I mean, at minimum, the story would come out. But if you can't tell, like even though I'm salty over that story, like I don't fault anybody for feeling that way. I even have friends, by the way, that have like kind of like, yeah, Kyle, that work you were doing, I don't know. And I'm like, dude, if you knew my work, you would one, probably high five the fuck out of me. Two, you'd actually be bored of how not sexy some parts of cybersecurity are.
Were you surprised by the situation though, that like a Snowden approach that?
Yeah. And I think the reason why is like, even when you have like juicy stories, remember like when Blackwater was still Blackwater before it became XE and everything, you still had some like hardcore ass mercenaries that was accused of killing some, and it was kind of salacious, but it was like some badass. But like, hell, give me the wrong bad haircut and my patchy facial hair. I kind of could look like Snowden and the stuff that I'm joking about, but like, I was just shocked. I was like, this fucking nerd. Like, I'm a nerd too, but like, that shows anybody, right? Regardless of like with the right MO, like real damage could be done. Again, I theoretically should be alive to get to see when the Snowden stories actually get declassified. I hope that it doesn't just keep getting classified over and over. And then I'll be able to be like, remember back in 20 whatever that when I had these podcasts? But yeah, to be very frank, I was surprised that a system administrator with basic admin rights. I mean, it makes sense. He had access to the data, just like we were talking about from hacking and everything else. Knowledge is power. And I think that never like, I was in counterterrorism, but I was never like counter espionage in the sense of like internal, like double agent type. Like I was never around anything. We're not that cool behind a computer. But I was shocked. I was like, man, that dude did some real damage, and he didn't have to be Rambo, right?
Well, the most incredible part about it too is with every agency and every guy I've ever had on, Tony Cowden was literally just the last episode we released. He was with the CIA SAD team, so like their paramilitary group, and they would do operations with you guys where you guys would help them find their targets. They'd be like there and go hit the target.
Yep.
He's talking about like, we would have opportunities where they'd be able to hack in the guy's phone, turn on the camera, be like, he's in there, go. They hit it. And he's like, but my cross connection with a CIA case officer, I never knew their assets. And he goes, and I would never know like all those other things that are happening in the agency. Same with the NSA. It's like, you guys have so many layers. I imagine that the information he would initially look at could be interpreted by one group for this mission.
100%. Like I was even shocked. I remember telling people like embarrassingly bad. I was like, NSA doesn't touch this type of stuff. It's wrong. It's wrong. And then I'm seeing stuff and I'm going, I guess I don't fully know what I'm talking about. Like, again, it's so big. And even like you said, you could see the same data 2 different ways and be like, that is absolutely okay. That is not okay. And again, if nobody clears it up, perception is whatever somebody wants it to be. So that's why I didn't think about that on the physical side. You said that was Tony
Cowden. Yeah.
And so I could see that though. Cause yeah, you would have no idea, like even the software missions and stuff, I could technically have access and it could be another agency type mission. I mean, it's that compartmented. I would hope that whoever controls at the top is doing some deconfliction, but you know, yeah. And I could even see, you know, from a completely different perspective, I would see somebody else's own mission and be like, that's not above water. But that's why you have like internal whistleblowers and like you actually have like a JAG, you know, the lawyers to be able to like.
That was a good call.
That's not looking okay, you know?
Yeah, well, because I was talking to him because we were just talking about how much technology is moving, and he was like, "This is in 2008 when we were hitting houses like that." But again, he's like the internal politics that play in it and everything. And in his perspective, he's like, everyone likes to think it's a big bad wolf, and they have this China 5, 10, 50-year plan. When realistically, it's like a lot of times we're operating on this mission, we're getting help here. They might be doing this, they conflict, or this causes more issues over here. Like, it's just such a big, and there's so many different variables involved and different agencies and everything that, again, it's like when the whistleblowers come out, especially with this, the whole case was crazy because I'm incredibly interested to see 2040 as well, because again, it's one of those things where you get a better picture on the structure and what everything looks like on the inside, while also seeing like, man, we overreacted like a lot of things.
And I mean, isn't that like life though?
Yeah.
You know, I think of, I mean, there's a reason things like TMZ exist. You get one picture from the wrong angle and it's like, so-and-so is doing this. And then it makes the headline, people make money, and then everybody forgets about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just happened to be a scenario that someone made a movie about.
I'll tell you on the podcast, when I bring people on too, they'll immediately like CIA or NSA or Delta or all this, like they'll start asking like outrageous questions or associating one thing with another. And I'm always like, guys, like, just because this is an FBI agent doesn't mean he worked and did this with this FBI agent. Like, they're not all, you know, or even I'm sure some of the things you get read on and like guys in Delta, you know, say the same thing. Like, you have a squad or you have a team of 12 or whatever, and it's like only maybe 3 guys are getting read on to this one thing that they're doing it. Yeah. Like, they can make groups much smaller. Even in
these special access programs, 100%. You might not know. Like, my job was on deployment, and part of it was media exploitation. So one of my deployments was after we, you know, smashed in, I had to gather. It wasn't up to them to know what intelligence. That intelligence was shipped off to another team that would go through it. We were just collection and exfiltration. And then somebody else has to go figure out, like, what does it mean, et cetera. And I have to guarantee that, you know, they go back and they could see my chain of custody. This data wasn't tampered with, et cetera. But like, it's so wild because the apparatus is large and it's meant to be distributed. It's meant to be resilient, but it comes with some of these problems of, while it's very resilient, I mean, even internally, I wouldn't trust intelligence sometimes that I would get given. Like, the word high confidence has a real meaning. And sometimes I would have to, you know, see, hey, I saw it here. And now that I've seen it on all source, I now feel high confidence behind it when I'm doing analysis. Because even if I collect it myself, I don't know why we collected. I don't know why we went after that building. I don't know why we got that data. I don't know why I had to hack into that to gather that intelligence. And so it's really wild. I think, you know, from the outside, you just kind of assume it's so much like, oh, well, Kyle, you grabbed this and then you opened it up and you looked at it and then you made the decision and then you took action. And it's like, oh, no, I'm a cog, right?
Yeah.
Obviously I'm not blind, but that was actually part of the most unfulfilling two parts of working in the intelligence community is how many times I'd throw something over the wall and have no idea how well it worked or whatever. Did it go to the president for a briefing, or did it make no difference at all? And you could spend months sometimes on something and actually get no feedback. It's like, all right, now on to the next mission. It's crazy.
So looking at some of our allies in the cyberspace, I'd say Israel and Mossad are one of the ones that often pop up just because of how complex their systems often are, and they come out with some of the most advanced. I mean, I could be wrong, but I know a lot.
Per capita, they're dense. What I mean by that is considering how very, very small, like physically in size, Israel is, and the total amount of population, they are dense. And there's a reason they have a reputation, both in cyber and in the human inside of the house. So you're not wrong.
How do you look at them as an agency? Because I feel like, again, a lot of these prolific technologies that they'll pop out with, I mean, it's oftentimes like we'll even be caught off guard. They'll have, whether it's abilities to get in access to different databases and to phones and records and this and that.
I mean, I think we as like the US can't relate to Israel very well because like we don't have, like, when's the last time you felt like existentially? I can't even say that word right now.
Existential threat.
Yeah. When's the last time that you were like, Mexico might take over the US? Like, and they have like on all sides people that are not very happy with them for many, many years. So as a result, like the culture is polarized different. They feel differently. There's a reason conscription actually works. If we put conscription in the US, my like loving punk 21-year-old son, he'd be like, they're in a very different, mindset of than ours. And as a result, I think it's very hard even for me to understand what that life is like. Like the idea of just watching rockets and be like, oh, we have a missile defense system. So when people are shooting rockets at us, like how many rockets did you dodge here in the US today?
No.
This month, this year? No?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a rocket in the US?
No.
So it's one of those things that I find it that even I don't work super close, but I definitely had collaboration over years. I mean, you just can't, they're an important, adversary historically to the US. And I think the things that people forget is like to pretend like we can guess what they go through, but we definitely leverage them, especially in sticky situations. Like there's been just plenty of open source, unclassified examples of where we said, hey, this was too heated, etc. But it sure does seem from just casual eyes that like when we need it done, sometimes these things get done. But again, they don't have a next door neighbor that's like, I want to nuke you off the planet and remove you. Like we've got a little bit of, the the Kim Jong-un, DPRK, a little bit of that. But I don't know. I think if you can't tell, it's one of these for me that I don't think about that a whole lot. I've only thought about that as like a cooperative ally at times. But I don't know. I couldn't imagine, what that's probably like of having to defend, or the idea of everybody having to go through. If you're willing and able or healthy and able, you can go to conscription and learn military. I mean, to have a military apparatus where most people have had some level of service, whether they went to advanced or something. I mean, I bet the culture is just fundamentally different. And I don't mean the culture that you can see when you go visit, but,
very patriotic and like, and it feels like you even get this in countries like Taiwan and stuff, which have Japan's like similar, South Korea, where there's different circumstances for sure, but they have this level of patriotism and really commitment to the country. And I get that, like, kind of, I think you're putting that perfect. It's like their technology is so impressive. And I guess that's kind of where I wanted to see your perspective on that. Because, again, they're facing these unique threats that the U.S. never really does, that they have to get kind of what you were saying, creative, like the Estonian has to think of but looking at it from like a technological perspective, Like, how impressed are you with some of these items that they're able to come out with? Because it feels like
it's not by accident that a lot of these companies get founded in Israel and then, move to the US and become multi-billion-dollar companies. They're clearly sharp, great, impressive people. Going back to it, I do believe intelligence is distributed equally. That means low intelligence and high intelligence. So while I am super impressed with like Israeli founders, there's so much cybersecurity that's Israeli cybersecurity. It needs to be. They've found a way. It makes a lot of money and makes sense. But things that I don't think some folks are, sleeping on, Iran is in kind of a similar situation. DPRK, North Korea is in a very similar. We could see both of those countries become the equivalent of like our anti-Israel. What I mean by that is not that they don't like Israel, but like the antithesis side of the house of where we have Israel. Look what Russia has just done very successfully, has used crazy innovation on the drone innovation from Iran and crazy both human power and rocket power from North Korea to just pummel, Ukraine. And so as unique, I think Israel is, it's just crazy unique. What's unique about them is how well a lot of Israel has had access to Western finances. They're just playing 4D chess, right? Making sure they have cash. I'm not so sure we're not seeing the same similar playbook happening where North Korea is like, all right, I'm going to do a little bit of this for China. I'm going to do a little bit of this for Russia. And all of a sudden we see like a hermit kingdom no longer be the hermit kingdom. They might have some of their own economy that starts, because what we're seeing is like, you can't be a fool and also create intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. Like that doesn't happen. You can talk trash all day long about North Korea. They have some missile tests that shoot 2,000 miles out through the atmosphere. There's clearly sharp people there. And I think that's just something that, Israel has crushed and been able to get access to like finances. So many sharp cyber talent comes out of Israel. I think it just, countries have to figure out what they're going to specialize in. And in this case, North Korea is choosing to steal their Bitcoin for finances. Israel's doing it with capitalism very well. And I think it's so impressive. So, curious, where were you? Do you ever get like different opinions? I mean, right now, obviously there's all kinds of stuff that is either pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, I don't care. I mean, there's 1,000 things to get bent out of shape on today. I'm curious, do you ever have guests that feel equally or similarly? Like, I mean, they're so impressive.
So in every spectrum of it, we've had guests that I think always come to the viewpoint where they're extremely impressed about their capabilities. But even on the side there is that specifically when you look at Mossad, it's that if we like a common question I may ask would say, right, who do you think is our biggest competitor worldwide? A lot of times they'll say China, Russia, mostly China. But a lot of times it'll come down to Mossad too, because in terms of an intelligence apparatus, they're one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive in the world. And I think a lot of agency guys will sometimes be thrown off about it's seldom that as a U.S. agency that someone beats us to the punch, you know? And I think that that's what commonly is so impressive is, again, a country of that size can have such a prolific and strong intelligence apparatus.
The power of proxies. I mean, I don't think most people understand of how important proxies are to being able to play this much higher bar of chess. And that's in cyber. That's in, even using your own, as I mentioned, research institutes or universities. Those can act as proxies.
Yep.
China definitely does this. We have all kinds of Air Force Rome labs, Sandia National Labs, Idaho National Labs. They're not national labs just for the sake of it. There's collaboration going on there. So it happens all ways. But I don't think people quite realize, we saw Hamas dealt a serious blow to Israel. And that was proxy. Wasn't even Iran directly. Proxy. Most people forget, Cold War wasn't that long ago. Cuba's a really interesting proxy for Russia. Most people don't even know.
And actually Tony pointed this out, that they're one of the best human intelligence resources that are in the US, because we don't really look at them as a common adversary.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody would think of that now. But if, the human network and things like that, especially during Cold War, acting as a proxy for Russia, like proxies are so critical. Then again, I talked about it's not by accident that state National Guard units are being paired with foreign countries like Estonia. That's proxy work too, but at a state level. So, I mean, again, this stuff is, I just find it fascinating of if this was simple.
And I think that's why some of the CIA guys I had on and everything, that they'll be thrown off by a Mossad, is that we're allies with them. But again, they're so advanced, which a lot of times we're kind of an Estonia, we're more advanced than them, we're bringing them to the show, that it's just crazy to have a proxy item that we're working with, that we're using, but also there's times where they outdo you and you're like, man, how did you guys develop that? And that's where I think that the complexity comes. There's obviously, the negative thoughts that a lot of people have kind of gone that direction, but it's less so that, and it's more so, it's just amazing where a country is able to, again, and I feel like a lot of the guys, Delta Force guys, feel like this. If they're working with their local Peshmerga and they do something crazy, it's getting outdone impresses us, and also sometimes puts us on notice where we're like, wow, they are moving and sophisticating at a level that we just didn't expect.
We talked about before the camera started rolling, we talked about you just sometimes being outdone or having those surprise moments that, catch you off guard. And as I'm gathering some of my thoughts about some of these, I mean, I alluded earlier to even me at Huntress right now, my investors can high five me, but I know I'm losing to brilliant. I mean, cybercrime at the end of the day is just an economy. It's just a business that makes crazy money. And I don't think people want to give sometimes credit to adversaries where it's due. And, I won't be all kumbaya, but I hope that some of this stuff, are you tracking some of what is it? Is it 3i Atlas 3i?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Where I'm going with some of this is, we might need some extraterrestrial type moment to help bring us back and help us remind we are all very, very smart.
Yeah.
We all can kill each other, but I can't say, can't we all get along? But man, there's some level of this where I'm as much as I've spent my whole career in intelligence, and now I'm defending against a whole different adversary, right? Different levels of intelligence, cyber intelligence. Part of me is just man, we waste a lot of freaking time. Can't we
bickering over stupid stuff?
Yeah, things I get it. Don't get me wrong. If I'm somewhere where I have no economy whatsoever and no opportunity and corrupt government officials, I might have turned to cybercrime too. I would hope that ethically I wouldn't, but I bet the people locally probably feel pretty good about somebody bringing somebody great access to jobs and everything else. But the point I'm getting at is I just think many of these perspectives that I don't know, we're going to need better diplomacy and we're going to need better reasonableness, because right now, my goodness, I mean, we'll find 1,000 reasons to wreck each other, whether it's, grain war. And I'm going, maybe it's just me getting older. I will say I just had a 40th birthday not long ago. Maybe this is my gray hair coming through finally. It's starting to... just wish we could chill sometimes. And
well, you see the capabilities of a lot of these things too. And it's Tony had a similar sense of stuff where we would talk, because his was a little bit different, where, he ran politics and he saw some of the shadiness that happens in the background there. It's kind of it sucks when a lot of this stuff and what the positive use cases are. And then you see someone use a negative use case, and it's just we're so close if we want it to be. And it's, what do we need to do to be able to get there?
I'm gonna have to find this Tony episode that you mentioned, just because like we had talked and I got distracted earlier, but I talked about our pre-gaming and what we were talking about. We were talking about how some of us in this career, even though we do something very different, we all kind of follow this like very similar pattern matching. Like the intelligence service, the military attracts a certain level of person. And it's hilarious to hear myself, like, I guess, overlapping with another guest that's having these thoughts. But like, we've never worked with each other. I don't even know who he is, but I'm really also not surprised that so many Venn diagrams overlap to be good in this business. And what a surprise. What you're left with in the middle is a very small group of people that seem like, you know, have very similar perspectives. Whether they're right or wrong, maybe we're both wrong.
But it makes great conversation too, you know. I got 2 more guys that I have to hook you up with that I think would be great. One's Dave Fielding, and then he was Intel as well. And then Yasif Alinsky, who's he's Green Beret, but he wrote those books up there, which I'll show you after the podcast. Story is incredible. But I guess diving in, I mean, we went through a bunch of loopholes here, but you know, obviously we talked about Huntress in and out, and what inspired you to kind of go that direction and open up that door as well?
I've given myself a chance to think, because I've answered this question before on podcasts, and I've noticed, like, for real, not just because I turned 40, but like I'm noticing I'm starting to think about things differently. The one obvious one is I am probably the right amount of broken that I have to have a mission. I have to have something that's bigger, that whether you call it, like in the Air Force, we would call it service before self. Silicon Valley often says we before me. Same darn thing. I had to have a mission. Like I have to. If I don't have that, I start like asking like, well, what's my bigger purpose, right? I think we're kind of all in that same battle, right? 100%. What's our purpose in life? But the inequity side of the house, like having, and that was the best part about like deployments and traveling and joining the service so young. I got to see a lot of places where folks were under-resourced, maybe didn't have a real, like an honest, you know, leg in the fight, but they were good, intelligent people. They just got maybe bad cards dealt. And the more I've thought about this in hindsight, I think that inequity was actually a big part of, like, I knew cyber, but I could have done an offensive business. Like there are actual companies out there that create exploits and they do offense, but like I don't do any offense at Huntress anymore. None. It's all defense. I think I needed that change too. I just had, like, when you go and you hack things for years and you win these competitions, there's just not a whole lot left. Like I always wondered, like, why did Michael Phelps swim so long? How many more? He just needed more golds. Like, I don't know. And I wasn't at that level. I'm nowhere close to a Michael Phelps, but in cyber, I checked a lot of the offensive boxes for myself. And so I needed something that brought me back. And when I realized that people were only protecting kind of like the Fortune 500 companies, and nobody even thinks like there is a literal poverty line that exists from Fortune 500 below that. They're companies that most people just don't even build products for. And when they do, they overcharge them, or they require expertise that the companies don't have. And that like weird obsession on the mission. You've heard me say it a couple times in here. There's a lot of people who just build something and are like, I'm going to give you an output. Think of AI. I'm going to give you an answer. But to be honest, sometimes the AI answers are just a whole bunch of stuff. And now I got to sift through, I got to analyze through the noise. And then I got to be like, that is the most right answer. But a real outcome is like the measurable, valuable part.
Yeah, understanding the business you're working with.
And so as I think of all the different places, I like technology. I like to think. I like to be creative. I like to have really passionate opinions, but hold them loosely, meaning if something has something better, like if we find out tomorrow, Satoshi is just a Japanese dude that was chill and he doesn't want to ruin the world.
Yeah, he burned it.
Yeah, he burned it. I'm going to be cool with that too. I'm going to have my passionate opinions, but hold it loosely and be cool with that. And I think what was neat about Huntress is I did the service thing. I did 16 years. I felt really good about the nationalistic side. And I thought I could use those same skills. And how could I protect these people? And even if I don't get it quite right, I don't need to. I think actually in hindsight, I over-rotated. So much of my identity after leaving the military was proving myself.
Perfection in a way too, because
I think it was making up for like in the service, you get limitations. I never had like a, the degree for being an officer or anything. So I think I had a lot that was like not personal, like probably fucked up a little bit of like, I needed something to prove.
Mhm.
But this next 10 year, I'm 10 years in at Huntress now, and I'm kind of going, okay, how will I do it different? And oddly enough, a lot of what I'm doing different is like, how do I not personally burn myself out?
Mhm.
How do I make time? Like even this, in my first like 6 or 7 years, I don't even know if I did podcasts or anything. If I did, they were always with like friends or something, like somebody that I was directly connected with, because I was like the mission.
Mhm.
And then I went through all this stuff, man. I went through like divorce. My kids, 2 of them are now like grown up, moved out of the house and college type stuff. My last little one she's 14 going on 24. And so it's weird about it is at this point now, I do have a bad guy. There is cybercrime. They are stealing. They are creative. And I do sometimes have to take time to admire how good they are. But it's also not getting caught up in all the doom too of like, man, AI is going to take over and OpenAI is going to take all my customers and Bitcoin is going to drop and it's either going to save the world or ruin the world. And I just had to take a step back on there and get reconnected with people. And the coolest part about working with, like sometimes my businesses I work with are like 10,000 employees, small enterprises, but sometimes they're like 10 employee and they're just people. And that dude, like, I think that was the one part of all the military stuff. I like the connection with people. And so now in hindsight, having this connection with people again, just on a different thing against a different adversary, it's given me enough purpose now that I've been able to kind of like invest in like my mental health, invest in like my family. And
You do an ice bath?
a little bit of it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Part of it for sure. I'm working out differently now. I'm reading now and I don't know, just trying to be a good person.
Yeah. I guess where do you see Huntress going from here over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. For the finance people, what they would want to hear is, well, we're not only going to IPO, like I'm on a way, the Huntress today is probably well over maybe $3.5 billion company today. Feels like the last podcast I did, we were only at 2, but it's because we are making a difference. So Huntress will continue to wreck hackers. We'll keep going wherever the hackers go. If it's securing AI for tomorrow, we'll be doing that, right? If it's something like, if it's defending the aliens that try to hack us that come from that new comment,
It's not them.
we'll probably pivot to that. Let's hope it's not that.
Yeah.
But that would unify us, wouldn't it? Right?
I'm going to Boston to talk to Avi Loeb, who's the Harvard.
Are you really? Yeah. That's one of the
uh,
dissenting sides, right?
In December, we're flying there to do that. And I got to pack all this and do that. And it's going to be, because originally he was going to come down to Dallas, but then he's like, we can set you up in like, or the physics lab they have there. And I was like, we should
do it. You should do that.
There. Yeah. But yeah. And he thinks that in the next couple weeks, we should know because it just, sped up. So if it loses 10% of its mass, it would confirm that it's a comet.
Mm-hmm.
If it's under that number, especially if it's significantly under that number, then questions would have to be
more
asked.
questions, right? So as long as it's not aliens, company's going to thrive. We're going to keep making a difference. We're going to be, while there's great companies that protect the big enterprises, we're going to be all about, all businesses, not just those in the top 1%. And then for me personally, I freaking love my job, man. I'm lucky enough that I'm really good at it. I've been able to take this offensive mission and actually I go toe to toe offensively against these hackers. Like it feels good sometimes to wreck them, put them in handcuffs, embarrass them if they're in another country. We've exposed some North Koreans and actually got access to their passports and everything, which is funny. You don't think North Koreans have passports, but they do.
Yep.
They might be under a cover alias. They might be pretending to be Chinese, but it's really neat. And I will say that some of this stuff, man, it's cool to be able to make a difference, hire good people nowadays. I'm still the CEO, I'm still the co-founder, but I've got a whole team now. I've got 800 people underneath me who are in this war with me. And probably next time you and I catch up, we'll probably be a couple thousand. It's just that type of growth. So anyways, dude, I'm having a good time with it. And the biggest thing I'm hoping is I just don't want to burn out, right? Too damn old and work too hard to burn out at this stage. So
well, if you're loving your mission, what we've said today, there's not going to be any shortage of new interesting challenges coming on too.
Nah, not at all. It's going to be insane. And maybe it doesn't take 15 years. Maybe it only takes 5.
Yeah, no, that might be what it is too. And it's like, I mean, again, I was super excited to see your mission too, because I think where the world's going, and also even bring this back to like kind of an espionage intelligence level, those smaller businesses are the ones that are actually targeted a ton. It's a similar way where I had David Zhang on. He's an expert on China and everything. He was talking about the way that they infiltrate and recruit politicians or even people within these businesses is they find them very early. So like if you're a local state senator, local mayor or something, they'll start to honeypot you up a little bit. It's the same. A lot of these companies, they'll target startups because they recognize an engineer from that
Swim
startup.
upstream, wait till they get bigger, wait till they get more influential, leverage their access because they're somebody small fish today, but big fish tomorrow. Like you're nailing it, dude.
Exactly. And you guys are going to play a critical role in making sure that, that security stays forward.
We're going to try. I'm feeling good today, but we're against brilliant humans and brilliant AI on the other end. So we'll see what, 2025 and beyond looks like.
So let me ask one kind of wrapping up question for the listener, and really just kind of how they should approach their own privacy today.
Yeah, let's do that.
How does one avoid being hacked, or how do they keep their security?
Yeah, we get caught up in our heads a whole lot that getting hacked is a stigma. You're going to get hacked in 2025. Mm-hmm. You cannot stop it. If I needed to go after you, I'm going to get in you. You're not going to do it. You're not going to stop me. There's just too much data, too much code. AI is creating all kinds of new fast code. It's also creating some vulnerable code. It's also finding vulnerabilities. It's a little meta.
Never make a database on Curse.
There you go. Yeah. And so it sounds like from personal experience. No, but the part I'm getting at is I actually think we as a whole have to fundamentally change our perspective on this. There's still things that you have to do. Like for instance, the good old fashioned, use an app to create your unique passwords for you every time. You shouldn't be able to remember your passwords. I don't care which one you use, 1Pass, LastPass, whatever, go use one of those. I'll tell you, that makes it so freaking hard on me. Like when I can just go out and buy your password off the dark web because I know you reused it over and over, that makes my job so easy. Mm-hmm. That annoying phone pop-up thing of the 2-factor authentication, that now makes me have to get into your phone, not only get into your account, but get into your phone. That is a huge way to protect yourself. It is so much harder. I have to go through all kinds of extra hurdles. I can still get there if I want, but it's like outrunning a bear, right? You just don't want to be the slowest person. Those 2 things. And the other part is when you do get hacked, when somebody does get your password and they do register a phone as you, they call up Verizon and say, Verizon, I promise I'm so-and-so. They're going to get in eventually. And when that happens, it's about minimizing, not preventing you from getting sick. If I told you I can make sure you don't get cancer, you'd tell me I'm a liar. Mm-hmm. I'm now telling you the same thing. You can't prevent yourself from getting hacked. But what you can do is when you do get hacked, hopefully you're only getting hacked by the hardcore. And when you do, for instance, get hacked, you want to find it early. You don't want to wait till it's stage 4 cancer and terminal. You want to find it real early. And so I think that what most people don't realize, especially from a personal level, sometimes the best thing in your pocket is just having somebody to call, right? If you got hacked, you could hassle me, right, on a personal level. And I'm not saying it doesn't always have to be a company. This isn't a vendor pitch, but you don't got to go at it alone. I think people, we never went at it alone in the intelligence world. Mm-hmm. If we couldn't do it, we'd call the Brits. The Brits couldn't do it, we'd call the Australians, right? We'd call the Canadians, etc. And I just think that people sometimes forget these things of when you get hacked, you sometimes got to have somebody to call. And sometimes, by the way, people don't always pick up. Facebook isn't known for being, or Meta for being the greatest at helping you get your account back. No. Sometimes they're like, sorry, you don't pay us anything. Remember, you're the product, and they don't help you unless you're paying ads. And then they'll do it because they want you to spend more ad money. But I think that type of basic advice for the normal user. Notice I didn't say anything about patching. I didn't say all that typical advice that most people do. Watch your links that you click. You're going to click the wrong links. What I want you to do is when you do get compromised, I hope that by having a unique password, they're only getting into one thing, not all things. When they do get that password, I want them to have to jump through another hurdle of getting a unique code or some physical device you have to plug in. To be very frank, if you did those 2, and coupled it with a really good backup, you're probably better than, at least the slowest person outrunning the bear. And when you do get wrecked, you hopefully have somebody to call.
And just adding in, what would be some quick red flags you'd want to check out? Because you mentioned like catch it early.
Yeah, catch it early. So the biggest ones, like when hackers used to go at things, when I used to go at things, I used to go for we call it in the technical terms an endpoint, but that just means like a laptop or like a workstation, a desktop computer or a server. And what happens is, it's hard to find out. Like you don't know if your server is hacked. You don't know if your desktop, it's really complex. But nowadays people go after your identity. Because if I can just go after, and I don't mean your social security number, something like that. I'm talking about like how many things, if you use Gmail or you use Microsoft Outlook, right? Office 365, usually with that one account, you can log into like 9 things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what hackers are really going after.
Probably
these
guilty
days.
of that.
Dude, 100%. And if I got into yours, I bet I could get into like a business. You might have a SharePoint. You probably have all kinds of different apps that you log into, et cetera. So securing that sucker, because what happens is it's early finding. Like sometimes these hackers are lame. What I mean by this is they'll log in from like North Africa. You're probably not in North Africa that day.
Mm-hmm.
Having something that periodically checking or having somebody for you checking and saying, nah, you're not from North Africa. By the way, people that are slightly better, they use a VPN, the same thing that allows you to watch, Netflix shows in Europe. They'll use that. And now they're logging in from the US because a lot of people are like, well, I'll just say only US. Well, guess what? They can log in from the US too. They'll use the same VPN, right? And log in.
Yep.
And so checking these things periodic, just like you do a periodic check-in with the doctor, most websites, like your key ones, think of your Gmail, your at Microsoft 365. You can say, show me devices I'm logged in at. Review those devices. If you still have your old iPhone 13 and you're now on the 17 and you don't need that 13 anymore, go ahead and say, kill that session, log them off. If you have, for instance, locations that you're like, oh, I came here to Dallas and I signed in one time, but I'm no longer in Dallas. I don't need the Dallas session anymore. Kill that sucker off. But the part that I'm getting at is doing that's really hard. You imagine if I told you, like, give yourself your own physical, right? You might be able to check for basic lumps, but you need help. And that's where I went with just having, even if it's a friend, a geeky friend, come to a company, but like you can't go through cybersecurity alone. And I'll be very frank, even with me, who's like a hardcore geek, I still have people I call because it's just too much. You can't know it all. It's just like being a doctor that doesn't have any specialization. Your optometrist is not the same person as your dentist. It's not the same thing as your neurologist. And optometry and neurology are kind of related-ish, but also not. So the point that I'm getting at is you sometimes need, experience. You need to surround yourself with that. But if you do the basics, unique password, 2-factor, audit your logins, where they came from, your logged in sessions on the ones that really matter. Nobody cares if your Pinterest is hacked. Maybe there's something slightly embarrassed. That's not what I'm talking about. Check your bank, check your bank accounts. And then as businesses, you have to think of your equivalent. Because when the shady version of me, the cybercrime version of me, I'm not looking at your Pinterest. I want to know where you run payroll, not because I'm going to steal your payroll, but what I'm going to look for is how do I lock you out of your payroll for 6 weeks? Because there's no better way I know how to ask you for a $50,000 ransom or a $100,000 ransom. If you can't run your payroll or you can't run logistics and schedule a truck for 6 weeks, your business isn't working. You're not making money. And you're going to pay me whatever I want because I'm locking you out of these systems. And that's how hacking works in 2025. So you need to do these not on just your personal accounts, but if you're like
business
with a business, you better know what your key core assets are and you better protect your assets. It should be like a shirt.
Yeah, I mean, you just made me rethink all my security for both the YouTube and my personal life. But no, you're spot on. I think that's stuff that a lot of people don't often think about. But Comma Man, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was an awesome conversation. Awesome.
I'm glad we went so many places. This was great.
We went and I know I emailed this earlier, but I was like, I don't even know where it's most of the podcasts. We usually just kind of flow. It's the best way to do it. But this one we went every, different angle. If you want to let the viewers know where they could find, both of you, if you want to throw your social media out there or anything like that.
Yeah, nobody can ever spell my last name. So it turns out if you just put Kyle and the word Huntress together, you find me. I'm super active on LinkedIn. Like I talk a lot of shit on LinkedIn. But what's really funny is, you know, in addition with that, I'm pretty active on places like Reddit, giving actual business advice, giving similar stuff along this lines. And if I can't answer, just too busy, I got 700 badasses I can refer you to.
Perfect, brother. Well, again, appreciate you coming on the show, and it was
Yeah,
an
man,
awesome
this is
conversation,
awesome.
man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.